Prince Rudolph's existence is a contradiction. He is known as a selfish tyrant, yet he is also a mistress's child with a legitimate right to succession, making him a prime target. As an assassin once loomed over him, a question hung in the air. Why did he not resist? The answer lay in his own calm, knowing eyes. The narrative shifts back several hours to the Scorpio Palace, the official residence of the fourth prince within the Baldyke Empire. Inside, the atmosphere is tense. The palace manager paces anxiously, declaring that things are not looking good. It has been 7 days since Prince Rudolph was poisoned, and his staff waits with grim uncertainty. In a quiet moment, one maid whispers callously that it would be nice if the prince would just die. Maya immediately turns on her, sharply rebuking her for such a thought. Just then, in the royal bedchamber, Prince Rudolph's eyes snap open. He sits bolt upright, startling his attendants. Tapple cries out that His Highness has awoken after 7 days and frantically orders Maya to fetch the physician. A maid rushes to inform the palace manager of the news. Back in the room, Rudolph looks toward Maya with a steady gaze, telling her not to worry about him and dismissing the commotion as noisy. He internally resolves that he will not die as the physician arrives. The physician immediately begins his examination. While the doctor kneels beside the bed, the prince sits calmly, observed by the anxious palace manager, Tapple, and Maya. To check his faculties, the doctor asks for his name and age. The boy responds without hesitation. Rudolph First Baldyke, 14 years old. When asked if he knows his background, he confirms he is the fourth prince of the Baldyke Empire, son of the emperor. His explanation then erupts into a theatrical, almost childish outburst. He loudly proclaims that his mother was a commoner, that his siblings and relatives despise him for being a mistress's child, and that they are the ones who poisoned him. The blunt declaration stuns the room, prompting a mortified Tapple to shout, "That's enough." After the examination, the doctor finds no apparent issues. He, Tapple, and the manager excuse themselves, wishing the prince a swift recovery. Alone now, Rudolph sits on his bed and simply tells them to continue their rest. He sits alone on his bed after his staff departs, his expression thoughtful as he gazes into the dimly lit room. His thoughts follow the servants, certain they are on their way to report his behavior to their true masters. He feels their presence not as support, but as surveillance. He understands his precarious position all too well. To his brothers and the queen, he is nothing more than a nuisance. Meanwhile, as two maids walk down the corridor, one turns to the other, remarking on how strange Prince Rudolph had seemed. In another part of the palace, Mrs. Tapple confides in Maya, noting that the prince was far too calm for someone who had just cheated death. She voices her concerns about the many spies rumored to be in the palace, making it impossible to know who to trust. The other maids continue their speculation, concluding that since the prince has no allies, he must be overwhelmed with anxiety and fear, constantly worried about assassination. Unseen, Rudolph trembles in his bed, but their assumptions are wrong. Despite his trembling, a fierce resolve hardens his features. He knows with absolute certainty that he will not die. He is sure he will live for at least 10 more years. This confidence stems from a unique advantage. After all, he knows the history of this era, for he himself came from 300 years in the future. The memory returned to him at the most critical moment. As he lay on the verge of death from the poison, he recalled everything from his previous life. He now understands the truth of his existence. After dying as an average villager in another time, his soul traveled back through time and space, reincarnating into the body of Rudolph First Baldyke. He reflects on his past self, recalling the time before his memories returned. He was a hopeless tyrant prince, known for making a fuss over things he disliked, such as hating carrots, and for yelling, cursing, and making unreasonable demands of his servants. This memory fills him with disgust at his past stupidity. He concludes that the person he was before his memories returned was the worst human possible. With this fresh wave of self-loathing, he sits alone in his room, wondering how he should live from now on. Unseen by him, a cloaked figure crouches outside his window. His contemplation is shattered as the assassin bursts through the glass. Though startled, Rudolph's first thought is that his knowledge of the future will guide him. The assassin lunges, and the prince throws himself to the floor to evade the initial strike. The attacker quickly pins him down, holding a dagger to his throat. The assassin questions why Prince Rudolph isn't scared or resisting. Deciding it doesn't matter, the attacker raises the blade, declaring, "Prepare yourself, Your Highness." Before the blade can fall, the chamber doors are thrown open. Palace guards, including an archer, storm in, shouting for the intruder to get away from the prince. Arrows thud into the assassin's back and shoulder, causing him to cry out in pain. Wounded and thwarted, the assassin stumbles away from the prince and flees. The palace manager curses in frustration as the attacker escapes, having prioritized the prince's immediate safety. In the aftermath, Mrs. Tapple and Maya rush to Rudolph's side, asking if he is all right. Still sitting on the floor amidst the broken glass, the prince calmly tells them he needs to think and instructs them to leave the cleanup for later. Sometime later, the prince lies in his bed, hands clasped behind his head. He appears completely relaxed and unfazed by the life-threatening event that just occurred. Despite his calm exterior, a single bead of sweat traces its way down his temple. He lets out a quiet sigh, his heart pounding as he thinks to himself, "I'm safe." He lay in his bed, the recent terror still fresh in his mind. Even though he knew he wouldn't die, the assassin's attempt had been terrifyingly real. He concluded that the book he remembered must be genuine. His certainty stemmed from a book he cherished in his previous life, the Wilhelm War Record, an epic poem praising the hero Wilhelm. He now understood it was also a history book detailing events from 300 years ago alongside facts from the current timeline, including the recent poison and assassination attempts. The memory of the attack was something he never wished to experience again. Because of the book's knowledge, he had known that despite the violent intrusion, he would not die from that assassination attempt. However, the war record foretold a grim future. It prophesied that after repeated assassination attempts, Rudolph's suspicion would fester, leading him to murder all his rivals. His reign would be short, as he was destined to be killed in about 10 years, at the age of 25. Following that path, he would be remembered by history as the cruel Emperor Rudolph, a tyrant of unprecedented cruelty. He realized his personality would likely break under the constant fear and suspicion, driving him to kill his own brothers and seize the throne. In that future, he would be unloved and unneeded by anyone. He would curse everything around him and ultimately die in suffering. But sitting alone in his room, a fire ignited within him. To hell with that, he declared. He would live. He would fight against this predetermined fate and survive. With the memories of the future, he believed he could change history. With his new resolve, he moved to his nightstand, opening a small chest and retrieving a single coin before securing it inside a drawer. He gazed at the coin, his thoughts turning to that girl and a promise for a future day. He knew his first step to changing history was clear. He must discern who his enemies were, eliminate them, and resolve all the festering problems within the palace. His mind settled on a single, crucial word: ledger. It was the key to his next move. Acting on this thought, he addressed his maids, Tapple and Maya. He requested the ledger of the Scorpio Palace, explaining that his work had been delayed due to his recent illness. Tapple, his long-serving personal maid, was taken aback. She noted that this was a sudden and unusual request, as he had never shown interest in such matters before. He explained that he would soon be 15 and needed to learn his official duties, apologizing to Tapple for having burdened her. A palace manager intervened, suggesting the prince rest after the assassination attempt and leave the chores to them. Rudolph dismissed the concern, insisting he was fine and only needed the ledger. The manager assured him they were searching for the culprit, but Rudolph knew better. They would likely frame a random person, as the true instigator was probably one of his own brothers. Ignoring the empty promises, Rudolph suddenly turned and pulled a stunned Tapple into a firm embrace, leaving both her and a younger maid, Maya, speechless with surprise. Tears streamed down her face as she held him. She sobbed that she was sorry, lamenting that he had finally accepted the cruel fate that he and his brothers were destined to kill one another for the throne. She pulled back slightly, her expression filled with fierce devotion. She reminded him that she had been his personal maid since birth, having cared for him on his mother's behalf. Holding up her brooch, she swore a solemn oath to him as his personal maid. Her voice rang with conviction as she pleaded for him to rely on her. No matter what danger lay ahead, she vowed she would always be on his side. Rudolph listened in silence, his expression unreadable. As her words echoed, a chilling memory from the Wilhelm War record surfaced in his mind. The book had identified the person who lined their pockets behind the scenes. A sinister image of Tapple, surrounded by riches, flashed before his eyes. The realization struck him like a physical blow. So was you, Tapple. He recalled the text from the record. It stated that beside the cruel Emperor Rudolph, Mrs. Tapple was always standing. The passage continued, describing her as a venomous woman who would commit evil acts even in times of peace, using his name to fund her extravagances. The kind, loyal woman before him was fated to become his greatest betrayer. He holds Mrs. Tapple's hands, his expression a mask of gratitude. He thanks her aloud, but his mind screams with a single, frantic realization: she is guilty. This conviction stems from the trap he laid when asking for the ledger. Her clumsy, over-the-top acting in response only confirmed his suspicions. For the sake of his own peaceful future, he concludes Mrs. Tapple must be removed. Despite this grim internal conclusion, his outward demeanor softens into a gentle smile. He tells her he is happy she thinks so highly of him, but his mind is already set. He needs definitive proof, and he will not allow her to gloss over the matter. Releasing her, Rudolph steps back with an air of command. He announces that he will eat first and then begin his work, ordering her to bring dinner. A flustered and sweating Tapple stammers her understanding, earnestly asking him to teach her anything she might not comprehend in the ledger, completely unaware of the true nature of his investigation. After finishing his meal, Prince Rudolph observes a maid, Maya, who has just dropped and shattered a water jug. She explains that the handle broke due to its age, but the prince suspects she might be trying to destroy evidence. He approaches and asks her what is wrong. She responds with a nervous laugh, commenting on how everything in the palace has become worn out and old, and that the furniture in his room is in a similar state. She laments that these things are always causing trouble. Her fear-laced deference makes the prince realize he is seen as an object of terror. As this thought crosses his mind, Maya suddenly prostrates herself on the floor, apologizing profusely and promising to clean up the mess immediately. Startled, Rudolph tells her to stop, insisting that no apology is necessary. He then gently asks for her name. After a moment of hurried hesitation, she introduces herself as Maya. The prince acknowledges her with a kind expression. Later, during his customary walk after a meal, Rudolph finds the palace manager shouting at another attendant down the hall. The manager frantically orders the man to make sure the ledger is fixed before the prince returns. Annoyed by the delay, Rudolph calls out, asking how long they intend to make him wait. He confronts the group, which includes Mrs. Tapple. The manager stammers that he was just checking the ledger to ensure there were no flaws. Tired of waiting, Rudolph announces he will inspect it himself and tells the attendant to hand it over without further ado. Taking the large book, the prince flips through its pages. He remarks that they did a good job balancing the flow of money and that he sees nothing odd. The manager smugly agrees, stating he is managing it properly. However, Rudolph's gaze lands on one particular entry, and he asks what his staff is doing before deciding to question them further. His expression hardens. He points to a line item for furnishing, demanding to know why a large sum of money was spent on it. He reminds them forcefully that this is a palace, implying such expenses should be unnecessary. The manager and Mrs. Tapple look on in distress. In response to the prince's accusation, Mrs. Tapple steps forward. She reminds him that the emperor himself bestowed the Scorpio Palace upon him to manage. She then turns the situation around, asking the prince what he believes is the most important aspect of that management. With a steady, intense gaze, she raises a single finger and delivers her answer with conviction. It's dignity. She and the other senior staff continue their explanation to Prince Rudolph, insisting that furniture which undermines the dignity of the imperial family must be replaced. The palace manager agrees, lamenting that while many items need replacing, they never have a sufficient budget. Rudolph listens, appearing to consider their words. He then challenges their claim, gesturing to the room filled with worn-out furnishings. He questions why, if they are constantly replacing items, so much old furniture remains. Mrs. Tapple's composure falters. She insists the issue is not confined to this room, but is found throughout the palace, from the hallways to the fixtures. With a pained expression, she adds that even her own quarters are filled with worn-out items, devoid of dignity. Changing tactics, Rudolph presents a different ledger. He asks if they recognize it, noting that while it appears identical to the one they showed him, this version curiously shows half of the budget still remaining. His gaze sharpens, fixing on the palace manager. With cold certainty, he declares that the ledger they provided is a fake. The manager recoils, biting his lip in utter shock. The manager's shock curdles into fury. Now kneeling with the other staff, he points an accusatory finger and demands to know who gave the prince the second ledger. In response, the maid Maya steps forward, admitting she was the one. The manager cries out her name in disbelief as Rudolph confirms she found the document for him. A frantic argument ensues, with the manager screaming that Maya's ledger is the fake one, while Rudolph insists it is genuine. Maya, with determined tears in her eyes, presents the ultimate proof, a page bearing the official seal of the Scorpio Palace. Rudolph clarifies that this seal marks it as an official document, one that only he possesses the authority to use, making it impossible to forge. A heavy silence descends. Mrs. Tapple, her face slick with sweat, grimly accepts that their deception has been completely unraveled. It is over. With a sharp snap of his fingers, the prince issues a silent command. Instantly, two armored guards emerge and seize Maya, who cries out in terror as they restrain her. He gives the order to take them away. As the guards move to seize the corrupt staff, Mrs. Tapple cries out, begging the prince to wait. As she is being restrained, Tapple's desperation twists into fury. She glares at the palace manager, accusing him of being a traitor who blackmailed her into the scheme. Maya looks on, her expression one of pure shock. Her rage then pivots back to the prince. She screams that he won't die a good death, but her anger quickly crumbles back into pleading. She asks if he has no compassion for a single mistake, reminding him that she has served him loyally for 15 years. He listens to her frantic pleas, his own expression unreadable. He closes his eyes for a moment, as if in deep thought, before opening them again with a cold, steady gaze. Her words have no effect. Tapple struggles against the guard's grip, gasping for breath as she begs to be released. In a final, desperate gamble, she falls to her knees before the prince. She shouts that she has crucial information. She knows who poisoned him and who sent the assassin, pleading for a chance to speak. Her confession stuns the room into silence. The other staff members stare in disbelief as Tapple prostrates herself on the floor, begging for mercy from Her Highness. The prince's calm demeanor shatters. His eyes widen as he leans forward, demanding confirmation. "You know who sent the assassin?" he asks. A horrifying realization dawns on him as he recalls the history of the Vicar Emperor Wilhelm, who became a paranoid tyrant after repeated assassination attempts. With dawning horror, Rudolph declares, "It was you, Tapple." He understands everything now. She deliberately orchestrated the attempted poisonings and assassinations. Her goal was not to kill him, but to foster paranoia, making him suspicious of everyone so that he would rely only on her. The full weight of her profound betrayal settles upon him. Having unraveled the deeper conspiracy, the prince regains his composure. He turns his attention back to the ledgers, announcing that he will now double-check them, as there might still be other fraudulent activities at work. His cold resolve gave way to a frantic energy. In the disheveled room, Prince Rudolph declared his overwhelming busyness while the palace manager nervously urged everyone to get back to work. As the staff looked on, the prince took a moment to himself. He reflected internally that with the recent exposure of corruption, there should now be fewer fraudulent activities within the palace. But the calm demeanor was a mask. Internally, the prince was crumbling, admitting to himself that acting like a true tyrant was terrifying and that he couldn't maintain the facade any longer. He dropped the act completely, turning to the young maid with genuine relief. He thanked Maya, telling her that she had saved him and that he was done pretending to be a tyrant. Maya could only stare, confused by the sudden shift. Before she could fully process his words, he made a formal declaration, asking if she would be his personal maid from that day forward. Her shock was evident as a brooch, the likely symbol of her new station, gleamed. This appointment was a stark reversal of her expected fate. She had been warned that for accusing Tapple, she would be treated as a traitor by the other servants. Now, standing before the prince, Maya bowed deeply, filled with gratitude and vowing to do her very best. As she pledged her loyalty, the prince's thoughts drifted to the history he was so desperate to avoid. He was certain that the historical, cruel emperor became a tyrant precisely because he lacked any trustworthy allies. He understood now that his path must be different. To change history and ensure his own survival, he needed to gather more trustworthy allies. With this newfound clarity, a quiet determination settled over the palace grounds. And in the gardens, a new chapter began, marked by a single decisive act, the pruning of what was no longer needed. He sits alone within a garden gazebo, his mind focused. To get more allies, he must first take a decisive step. That step leads him to a walk through a beautiful palace garden with a young woman. As his maid, Maya, offers her thanks, the prince is struck by a sudden, powerful realization. He needs to acquire a fiancée. The young woman beside him simply remarks on the beauty of the garden, while Rudolph's heart pounds with his new, urgent plan. The plan quickly becomes a formal reality. The young woman introduces herself with a curtsy, stating that she is Lisbeth, the eldest daughter of the Farkrantz family. She declares it an honor beyond measure to be chosen as Prince Rudolph's fiancée. As she speaks, a flock of crows descends, their harsh caws filling the air with a sense of foreboding. They sit opposite one another at a small table, the unsettling cries of the birds echoing from beyond the pillars. The tense silence is broken by a violent image flashing through the prince's mind, the delicate white flowers on the table being brutally slashed apart. A dreadful thought begins to form. If he marries her, he will be killed. The thought concludes with chilling certainty as he looks at Lisbeth. She holds a bouquet of the same flowers, her expression a mask of serene menace as she comments on their pleasant fragrance. An otherworldly beauty sat before Prince Rudolph. Her hair was a lustrous black, shining like onyx, and her eyes, a radiant blue, glistened like aquamarines. But to him, she was not just a beautiful woman. He understood with chilling certainty that an engagement with her would mean one thing: inescapable death. This was not mere paranoia. He knew the fate that awaited him and the country because he knew the future 300 years from now. This knowledge came from his favorite book from that future era, an epic poem praising a hero titled The Epic of Wilhelm. Within that epic, it was written that he, Rudolph, would later reign as the Dread Emperor, only to be killed at a young age. The epic also chronicled the life of its hero, Wilhelm, and his deep love for a woman known as the Frostveil Maiden, Lisbeth Farkrantz. Their love story began when she gifted him a special brooch. Following an intense affair, they vowed eternal love for one another. However, their relationship was tragically torn apart by someone's interference. The one who shattered their happiness was Rudolph. Their love was shattered. In the end, filled with insurmountable grief and despair, Lisbeth closed her heart once again. The result of this historical tragedy was bloodshed. It was thus that the cruel Emperor Rudolph perished. His death led to the destruction of the Baldike Empire, and Wilhelm later founded the Sauvelier Kingdom. The specific details hardly mattered to the prince now. The conclusion was terrifyingly simple. Whatever the case, marrying her was a terrible idea. He stared into his cup, the reflection showing nothing of the turmoil within. The prince valued his life and had no desire to meddle in the affairs of others, especially not when his own future was so precarious. His reverie was broken by Lieselott's voice. She noted his pale complexion and asked if something was the matter. Before he could answer, his maid, Maya, quickly fabricated an excuse, suggesting he was merely overexcited from the day's events. Rudolph could only stammer a weak denial. As Lieselott observed him, his mind spiraled, conjuring an imagined conversation. In his head, a version of his fiancée gently chided him, saying she understood his nervousness but that his tea was getting cold. The fantasy continued, with this imagined woman revealing she had asked her father to find her a fiancé. The thought of breaking his own engagement sent a jolt of terror through Rudolph. It would be tantamount to spitting in the emperor's face. Still, he resolved to find an amicable way to end things with Lieselot. Pushing the dark thoughts aside, he finally spoke to the real Lieselot. He began cautiously, stating that he suspected she was shocked by the sudden talk of engagement and hoped it wasn't an inconvenience. Internally, he was convinced she must hate the idea. Her response, however, was completely unexpected. With a placid expression, she called the engagement an overwhelming honor. Her words did not soothe his fears. He believed she was merely following the emperor's orders, her heart already belonging to the historical hero Wilhelm. His mind once again concocted a scenario where he offered her an escape, suggesting that if she didn't want this, she could have her father decline the arrangement. In his frantic imagination, she threw the suggestion back at him, retorting that if the honor was too much for him to bear, then he should be the one to decline it himself. He was jolted back to the present by Lieselot's calm, measured voice. She assured him it was not an inconvenience at all and that he should pay it no mind, her composure startling him. She then explained that even if she wanted to refuse, doing so would require a proper reason and careful political maneuvering. In that moment, Rudolph understood. She wasn't passively accepting her fate. She was challenging him to do better, to be a more capable political partner. A wave of relief and understanding washed over him. He settles on his first strategy, which he internally dubs Plan Number 1, a 1,000 lies. With a composed smile, he decides that in this case, he will first take the opportunity to introduce himself. He imagines himself on a grand stage, bathed in a spotlight, boasting to an adoring crowd. In this fantasy, he claims to be loved by all, a genius unmatched in academics or swordsmanship since the founding of the Baldike Empire, worshipped by everyone in the Scorpio Palace. The prince internally recoils from his own fabricated persona, thinking how blatant the lies are. He worries that Lieselot would be so disappointed by his pretentiousness that she would call off the engagement, a thought that nearly brings him tears. His spiral of self-pity is abruptly interrupted by Maya, his maid. She enthusiastically agrees with his imagined praise, recounting how he addressed the palace corruption and saved her from being framed as a traitor. She declares him a truly wonderful person, leaving Rudolph aghast while Lieselot watches silently. He stares in disbelief, internally screaming at Maya to read the room. He realizes his first plan has failed spectacularly, and that he must try another approach. He composes himself, deciding it is time for the truth. Adopting a grave expression for Plan Number 2, threats, he announces to Lieselot that there is something important he must tell her. He recounts the recent dangers he has faced, explaining that he was poisoned by a maid and fell into a coma, only to be targeted by assassins upon waking. He emphasizes that although he is fourth in line for the throne, he is still eligible to succeed, making his life a constant target. He concludes his explanation by stating that marrying him would inevitably involve her in these dangerous political struggles. He presents this as a valid and sufficient reason for her to refuse the engagement. Lieselot listens, her expression unreadable. She then questions if there is a problem with that, reminding him that her family, the Falkrantz bloodline, has long been a symbol of the Empire's military and that she herself practices spearmanship. Her tone is sharp, almost challenging. She internally scoffs at the notion of being deterred by danger. To her, being scared of potential assassins would be nothing short of an embarrassment to her family's martial legacy. Her unwavering pride left Prince Rudolph scrambling. His previous attempts to dissuade her had failed, and he desperately searched his mind for an even better reason for her to break the engagement, muttering in frustration as each new idea proved useless. His frantic thoughts were interrupted when Lieselot spoke from across the table, her tone inquisitive. She asked if he would mind sharing some stories from when he was young. The request caught him off guard. He wondered what she was thinking, reflecting internally that there wasn't a single memory from his childhood worth mentioning. And yet, despite his conviction, a single memory surfaced. A young girl with dark hair thanking him for saving her, offering a small object as a token of her gratitude. The token was a coin. The vividness of the memory startled him. He realized he still held onto it after all this time, but quickly decided that those memories were his alone. There was no need to tell her about that. He pushed the thought away, returning to the present conversation with a stammer. He confirmed aloud that she had, indeed, asked for stories from his youth. His flustered reaction seemed to amuse Lieselot. A cruel, knowing smile spread across her face as she formed a suspicion. He was trying to make her bring up his infamous past so she could laugh at him. She mused that many of those stories were well known among the nobles. If that was his goal, she declared aloud that she didn't mind, adding with a sneer that she would probably just gossip about it with Wilhelm later. Hearing her taunt, a new resolve settled over Rudolph. He tapped his foot decisively. If she wanted a show, he would give her one. He decided then and there to dance to her tune, inviting her to enjoy his tale. He presented himself as if on a stage, bathed in a single spotlight. With a theatrical flourish, he offered to perform for her the idiotic, ridiculous, and miserable comedy of his life. He begins his tale, confirming what Lieselot likely already knows. He is an illegitimate child, the son of one of the emperor's mistresses, and, as such, he should not have been eligible to succeed the throne. Despite this status, his mother pleaded desperately with the emperor. Her request was granted, and he was officially made Rudolph, the fourth prince, placing him in the line of succession after the emperor's 3 legitimate children. This history led him to once ask his mother a painful question: "Why was I born?" Hearing this, Maya interjects, flustered, suggesting that surely his mother must have acted out of consideration for his future. Lieselot, meanwhile, remains silent and observant. Lieselot stares coolly at the stunned Prince Rudolph. She explains that her goal is, of course, to become a part of the imperial family. The prince can only manage a choked sound of disbelief. She continues, clarifying that her existence is merely insurance for her mother to continue a luxurious life within the palace, even after abandoning her. Lieselot elaborates on the political climate of the time. When a new mistress, Rudolph's mother, appeared and began acting as the mother of a prince, the established nobles and the royal family were deeply unamused. However, they couldn't publicly condemn her. As Lieselot speaks, Rudolph listens with a grim expression, while Maya looks on in shock. The bluntness of this political maneuvering leaves Rudolph, Lieselot, and Maya momentarily struck dumb in a shared, stylized moment of shock. The prince's mind drifts to his past, recalling the profound isolation. He remembers being on his knees, alone in a harsh spotlight, as the rest of the court whispered and stared from the surrounding darkness. He felt that no matter what he did, whether he excelled in swordsmanship, studied diligently, called out for attention, or asked for help, no one would even look at him. He came to believe that everyone treated him as if he didn't exist, or perhaps shouldn't. This included his biological father, the emperor, and even his own mother, who sought the emperor's favor, leaving Rudolph completely alone. That, he explains with a strained, wide-eyed expression, is why he decided to do things that they couldn't possibly ignore. He began to act out in extreme ways. He would break things on a whim, throw tantrums, and curse people out. He became unreasonably violent over the smallest things. For his own amusement, he would assign impossible tasks to the servants, only to punish them afterward and laugh at their suffering. Through these actions, the tyrant prince was born. He recalls the faces of the palace staff, their expressions a mixture of fear and sorrow. And yet, he admits to himself, seeing them look at him like that made him feel happy. He concludes his confession with a final, tragic metaphor. As long as he was a tyrant, a puppet dancing on a string, everyone would look at him. It was the only way he could command their attention. He concludes his tragic story with a hollow question, his face obscured. To Lieselot and Maya, he asks what they think of his life, calling it pretty funny. Maya, however, is horrified. She cannot believe His Highness has been treated so cruelly for his entire life. As she voices her outrage, Rudolph reflects internally. He thinks that he didn't need to be so honest to make Lieselot hate him, and now he is merely being pitted by his own servants. His thoughts continue as he glances at Maya, realizing she only recently became a maid and wouldn't know the full story. He concludes that there is no way the Frostvale maiden would ever accept an engagement to such a pitiful man. But contrary to his expectations, tears stream down Lieselot's face. Her silent weeping catches Rudolph completely by surprise, his eyes widening in shock. Flustered, he apologizes for rambling and offers her his handkerchief. He reaches into his vest to retrieve it. As he pulls out the handkerchief, several gold coins slip from his pocket, clinking as they hit the floor and startling everyone in the room. Maya stares, a flicker of recognition in her eyes, as she recalls the gold coin from before. As Rudolph bends to pick up the fallen money, Lieselot watches him, her expression unreadable. He turns his back on the tearful Lieselot, dismissing her emotions by stating they have nothing to do with him. The tense moment is interrupted by Maya's voice, announcing that it is about time to wrap things up. Her interruption leaves Rudolph wondering why Lieselot was crying. Maya, for her part, worries if her own words had somehow caused the tears. Lieselot simply watches Rudolph, silently questioning what is going through his mind. Later, as Lieselot prepares to depart in her carriage, Rudolph formally thanks her for her time. He suggests that, regarding the engagement, it would be best for her to send a letter with her reply once she has had time to think it over. He earnestly encourages her to take her time and consider the matter carefully. Lieselot, however, looks at him and questions the need for a letter. She states that it won't be necessary. Internally, Rudolph reveals his plan. He believed giving her an indirect way to decline would be easier and avoid any confrontation. To his complete surprise, Lieselot looks him directly in the eye and makes a firm declaration. She will accept the engagement. The unexpected acceptance strikes Rudolph like a bolt of lightning, leaving him utterly stunned and speechless. He stammers, demanding to know why. In response, Lieselot simply bows her head and, acknowledging her inexperience, formally asks for his understanding and support in their union. The shock is too much for the prince to handle, and he begins to wobble on his feet. Meanwhile, Maya celebrates silently, overjoyed that her highness has succeeded. He reeled from the shock, his mind spiraling into panic. Clutching his head, he wondered how things had come to this. To him, this engagement was a death sentence. At this rate, he was certain he would be killed. In the background, Maya watched him with concern, while Lieselot stood impassively, her face turned away. Unseen by the prince, a quiet exchange took place. With a chillingly serene expression, Lieselot praised her maid. "Good work, Maya," she murmured, her eyes glinting in the shadows. She then issued a new directive. please continue to observe him. With a finger to her lips, Maya affirmed her loyalty. Your wish is my command, Lisbeth-sama. 3 days have passed since Prince Rudolph was engaged to Lieselot, the woman he knows as the Frost Veil Maiden, who is fated to kill him in the future. He had resolved that his best course of action was to keep his distance, to avoid her wrath at all costs. Though uncertain of her true intentions, he was determined not to die by her hands. Or so he had thought, but his plan fell apart. He now found himself with his arm bandaged, utterly bewildered as Lieselot herself tends to his wounds. He internally screams, questioning how he ended up in this very situation. His panic mounts as he wonders why she is in his room. Lieselot, oblivious or indifferent to his turmoil, informs him that she has finished wrapping his wounds. She now holds a spoonful of medicinal soup, telling him it will hasten his recovery and instructing him to open wide. Flustered, Rudolph protests, insisting that she doesn't need to feed him and apologizing for having caused her worry. He attempts to downplay the situation with a strained smile, claiming it's nothing and that he's simply a clumsy person who hurt himself falling down the stairs. Lieselot remains silent, her expression unreadable. At that moment, the door opens and Maya enters with a tray. She addresses the prince, asking if his injury really happened from a trip on the stairs, noting that he was supposed to have had a meeting with the emperor today. As she places the tray on a nearby table, Maya's question hangs in the air, highlighting the contradiction in Rudolph's story for both him and Lieselot to hear. Lieselot's focus sharpens. She leans in close to Rudolph, her gaze intense. She dismisses his lie about falling, demanding to know why he was so badly hurt if he only went to see the emperor. She presses further, asking who assaulted him and why they did it. Caught off guard by her directness, Rudolph insists his injuries aren't a big deal. However, a memory flashes through his mind of the truth. Him coughing violently on the floor of a grand hall as 2 men rush to his side after an assault. He remembers the moment clearly, a hand grabbing the collar of his uniform, yanking it tight. He had demanded to know what was happening, his voice a mixture of surprise and defiance. The man holding him sneered, revealing that Rudolph knew full well what he had done. He had walked in front of Sir Robin, the third prince. From a short distance, Prince Robin himself, a cruel smirk on his face, ordered his subordinate to discipline the filthy pig. Rudolph recalled with bitterness that his older brother had used him as a punching bag ever since they were children. Following the order, the henchman kicked Rudolph to the ground. He loomed over the fallen prince, explaining that while assaulting a member of the royal family was normally a crime punishable by death, there was no one in this part of the palace to save him. He elaborated that the palace of the Baldike Empire is divided into 13 parts, one for each brother. And this is what happens when Rudolph dares to step out of his own Scorpio palace. With utter contempt, the man spat on the ground beside Rudolph's head. The prince could only glare back, his face streaked with grime and fury. As the memory of the henchman grabbing his face flashed through his mind, Rudolph snapped back to the present. He pleaded with Lieselot, insisting that what she suspected was not what happened and that she shouldn't worry. He was adamant, stating he did not want her to know anything more about the incident. Lieselot regarded him with a calm, unreadable expression. After a moment of silence, she simply replied, "Is that so?" Rudolph turned away, unable to meet her gaze. His mind raced with the truth he could not speak. He couldn't open his heart to her. He was certain that, eventually, she would become an enemy aiming for his very life. Just as the silence grew heavy, Maya, his maid, stepped forward. Addressing Lieselot directly, she announced, "Lisbeth-sama, this is what the prince is trying to tell you." Maya struck a proud pose, a confident smile on her face. She declared that she had personally dealt with the ruffians who dared to oppose him, and that his wounds were honorable ones. She told Lieselot not to worry about her honey. Rudolph stared in disbelief, shouting her name. He demanded to know what she was saying and what she meant by that impression of him. Maya retorted that he was the one who caught Mrs. Tapple red-handed, implying there was no way he would have gone down without a fight. He remained stunned and silent, his own thoughts a confused blank, as Maya's voice echoes her assumption that he must have had some kind of plan. His mind flashes back to the assault. As one of Prince Robin's men kicks him, the third prince scoffs that Lieselot was right about him. Announcing they've wasted enough time, Robin orders his men to leave. A moment later, however, a flicker of anxiety crosses Robin's face. He realizes with a start that at this rate, he'll be late for his appointment with their father. Just then, a stern, older man appears, shocking Robin and his attendants into silence. It is the head butler, personal attendant to the emperor. The butler's sharp eyes find Rudolph on the floor, and he calmly asks the young prince if he is all right. The head butler then turns his attention to his stunned Prince Robin, demanding an explanation. He states that by injuring Prince Rudolph's face, Robin has consequently damaged His Majesty's reputation, and that he will not escape the consequences. Ignoring Robin's seething rage, the butler helps Rudolph up, telling him to hurry as the emperor is waiting. He informs the young prince that he will listen to his excuses later and leads him away. As they walk, Rudolph's true intentions become clear in his mind. It was all a calculated move. He knew the head butler would come if there was a delay with the emperor's appointment, and it was worth goading them into a fight to make it happen. A fierce determination hardens his expression. He reaffirms his vow to survive to the very end, using his knowledge of the future and the experiences of his past life. The memory fades, returning him to the present. He dismisses any thoughts of Robin, realizing his priority is to decipher what Lieselot is thinking as she sits across from him, her expression unreadable. As if in answer, a slow, chilling smile spreads across Lieselot's face. Her shadowed eyes gleam with a predatory light, fixing on him with an unnerving intensity. Her unsettling smile lingered in his mind, leaving him flustered as he tried to compose himself. He turned to face Lieselot directly, his voice strained. He asked how her meeting with the Emperor had gone and if his father had said anything about their engagement. The question triggered a memory of that very meeting. Rudolph recalled standing before the throne, apologizing to his father for being late. The Emperor had dismissed his apology, noting only that the engagement matters seemed to have been handled smoothly. The memory continued, showing the Emperor lounging with a woman named Beatrice, who chided him for being a hopeless man before inviting him to have more fun with her. The Emperor, annoyed by Rudolph's lingering presence, questioned why he was still there. From somewhere unseen, Rudolph's mother's voice could be heard, thanking the Emperor for his help with the engagement. With a final, cold command to know his place, the Emperor dismissed him. The memory ended with the image of Rudolph walking away down a long, empty hall. Back in the present, sitting in his room with Maya nearby, Rudolph simply told Lieselot that the meeting was just the usual. Lieselot looked down, a shadow crossing her face as she quietly acknowledged his words. He then turned his attention to his maid, Maya, expressing his surprise at finding her there upon his return and asking why she had come. She explained simply that she had come to visit him. The straightforward answer left the prince momentarily speechless, as Rudolph internally grappled with his racing heart, reminding himself that Lieselot was an enemy. She spoke up. She questioned if it was strange to be concerned for her fiancé and asked if he was hurt this often. Before he could process it, she made a stunning declaration. From now on, she would visit his room every single day. Maya, ever the practical one, voiced her own worry for the prince, but suggested that perhaps every day was a bit much. Lieselot, however, was resolute. Her decision was made. Rudolph could only stare, stunned into silence by this unexpected turn of events. He reeled internally from her declaration. An image flashed through his mind, a delicate butterfly caught in a spider's web. It felt like an impossible situation. He was being cornered, bit by bit, with no escape in sight. Under the vast darkness of the night sky, a full moon shines brightly, its light piercing through scattered clouds. The moonlight illuminates the grand and imposing facade of the Falkrantz mansion. Within its walls, a long rifle is displayed as a decoration above a mantelpiece. A voice cuts through the silence, offering thanks. The voice belongs to Maya, who is reporting to Lieselot in an office. Maya expresses her gratitude, explaining that by becoming Prince Rudolph's personal maid, she has been able to get closer to him. Seated at her desk, Lieselot coolly instructs Maya to continue monitoring the prince. Maya accepts the order with a bow, addressing her as Lisbeth Salma. As Maya speaks, Lieselot's composed exterior crumbles into a private, love-struck fantasy. She clutches her blushing face, imagining Prince Rudolph and swooning over his dignified figure, amber eyes, and gentle voice. Her reverie is so deep that she doesn't notice Maya trying to get her attention, exclaiming that she needs to keep her feelings in check. Maya bluntly tells a startled Lieselot that she acted like a statue with a poker face the entire time she was with the prince. Flustered, Lieselot asks if she was really that unfriendly. Maya presses further, questioning why Lieselot doesn't act warmer towards him if she loves him so much, and suggests that the prince must be confused by her behavior. She continues, recalling how Lieselot's expressions and words were ice-cold and off-putting during their recent encounter. Lieselot can only stammer in denial, her composure completely gone. The criticism and her own embarrassment culminate in a sudden, explosive confession. Lieselot shouts that she's had a crush on him forever, and that her coldness isn't something she can control. Completely mortified, she hides her face and admits that she gets so nervous near him that her face tenses up and her mind goes blank. Watching her, Maya sighs, remarking that for someone who appears so confident, even visiting the palace daily, Lieselot is incredibly shy at heart. Maya offers some gentle reassurance, telling Lieselot she did well to muster the courage to say what she did. However, her praise is tinged with worry, as she admits she is concerned about what might happen to her, Maya, as a result of this arrangement. She watches as Lieselot, having procured a massive glaive, stands before a counter. Lieselot declares that to visit Prince Rudolph every day, she doesn't need courage, as she cannot forgive what has been done to him. Her fury erupts as she brandishes the weapon, vowing to protect the prince and turn his enemies to rust. She cannot believe he was treated so terribly and cannot forgive herself for living in ignorance of his suffering until now. Seeing her master's rage, Maya timidly intervenes, explaining that the recent attack was an exception. She reveals the culprit was most likely the third prince, who will not be coming to the Scorpia Palace, and begs Lieselot to put the dangerous weapon away. The news stuns Lieselot. Maya then puffs out her chest with pride, reminding Lieselot that as Prince Rudolph's new personal maid, she is in a position of authority. She boasts that since the Mrs. Tappel incident, disrespectful individuals have been eliminated from the palace staff. Annoyed by her maid's smug face, Lieselot grabs Maya's cheeks and squeezes them tightly, causing Maya to yelp in pain. Despite the pinching, Maya clarifies with a sly grin that her daily visits are not just to guard the prince, but to effectively have a date with him every day. The suggestion leaves Lieselot speechless. The prospect of talking with the prince so soon is too much for Lieselot, who collapses to the floor wailing that she can't do it. Maya, however, remains firm, grabbing her and shouting encouragement that she absolutely can. After composing themselves, they walk down a palace hall. Lieselot concedes, agreeing to the plan, but delaying it for 1 week. She then reveals the reason for the delay. It will be her birthday party. A blushing Lieselot fantasizes about dancing with Prince Rudolph, admitting to Maya that she's on the verge of fainting from happiness and nervousness, but she will resolve herself for the occasion. Moments later, Maya has Lieselot pinned to the floor, playfully declaring that this is payback for her earlier smugness. Lieselot protests that it hurts, questioning her maid's actions. While his maids finalize their plans, Prince Rudolph lay in bed, his mind consumed by a single question. He wondered if Lieselot was truly the same Frostvale maiden from the epic of the hero Wilhelm. He reflected on their meeting. Something felt off. Her demeanor was certainly icy, but it didn't seem like she was meeting him merely out of obligation. His thoughts turned to the timeline he knew from history. Neither the downfall of Mrs. Tappel nor his own search for a fiancée had occurred in the original version of the future. This led him to a startling conclusion. His own actions were changing the future. Lying back, he contemplated the path he was now on. He wondered if he was heading towards a timeline where he marries Lisbeth, and if she would pursue him on her own, even if he tried to avoid her. A dark thought began to form, a wild guess based on this new reality. If marrying Lisbeth was an unavoidable event, then perhaps something else was too. The question struck him with the force of a lightning bolt over the silhouette of a grand castle. Is his own death also an unavoidable event? Elsewhere, under the light of a full moon, a different kind of plan was in motion within the walls of another stately manor. Inside a lavish room, a voice broke the silence as a curtain was drawn back, remarking that someone's birthday would be arriving soon. The voice belongs to the third prince, Robin. He addresses Lieselot directly, telling her that he will come to pick her up. With a cold, possessive gaze, he holds a glass of wine and makes a chilling vow. He will make her his, without fail. Prince Rudolph and Lieselot sit in a tense, heavy silence at a table in a palace garden. Rudolph stares into his teacup, his expression troubled, while Lieselot sits opposite him, her own thoughts unreadable. The quiet is shattered when Maya rushes in, calling out to the prince. He turns, startled, and asks what she needs. As Lieselot looks on, Rudolph's mind races, desperately wondering if there's any way for him to survive the current predicament. She plants her hands on her hips, admonishing him. Sheesh, have you been listening at all? She asks, reminding him that Lieselot herself went to the trouble of informing him about his own birthday party. Maya explains that since the party is being hosted by his fiancée, he cannot simply choose not to go. Furthermore, she points out that arriving with a woman from outside the family would be considered rude. At his desk, surrounded by books, Rudolph concedes with a sigh that her point makes sense. He then leans in close to Maya, whispering a request. He needs her to prepare something for him beforehand. Intrigued, she leans in as well, asking what it is. Upon hearing his plan, Maya's expression shifts to one of comical determination. She puffs out her chest and declares that she will undoubtedly bring him what he desires, telling him to leave it to her. Rudolph affirms that he is counting on her. His resolve is now clear. At the birthday party, he must charm Lieselot with everything he has. In the distance, the Grand Fockrantz estate stands against the sky, the stage for his gambit. As evening falls, the narrative arrives at the Fockrantz family's magnificent and imposing mansion, where the party is to be held. Inside the entrance hall, Prince Rudolph is formally welcomed by the heads of the house, Marquis Douglas Fockrantz and his wife, Teresa. While Mrs. Fockrantz offers a warm smile, Rudolph is visibly shaken by the Marquis's severe, intimidating face as he offers his thanks for the invitation. A servant announces his arrival to Lieselot. As he is led up a grand staircase, Rudolph steels himself, thinking that he is fully prepared. He resolves to act the moment he sees her. He ascends the stairs and stops, his breath catching. Before him stands Lieselot, her dark hair elegantly styled up, wearing a striking dark gown with a halter neck and long, detached sleeves. A faint blush dusts her cheeks as she waits for him. The sight renders him utterly speechless. A deep, uncontrollable blush spreads across his face, his carefully laid plans evaporating in an instant. As he stands there flustered, Lieselot performs a graceful curtsy, formally thanking Prince Rudolph for attending. Startled back to reality, he stammers that the pleasure is all his. A gentle laugh escapes Mrs. Fockrantz as she observes the pair. She gestures for them to follow, leading them from the grand staircase into a private sitting room. She informs them that there is still plenty of time before the party officially begins, encouraging them to make themselves comfortable together before turning to leave. The heavy door clicks shut leaving the prince and his fiancée alone in the vast, silent room. They stand opposite each other, the space between them filled with a palpable, awkward tension. His mind races in panic. All the conversation topics he and Maya had so carefully prepared have completely vanished from his memory. Just as he musters the courage to speak, they both begin at the same time with a hesitant They fall silent again. Lieselot, blushing, quickly insists that he should speak first. Abandoning his forgotten script, he speaks from the heart. Still flustered, he addresses her as Lisbeth Dano and manages to tell her that she looks very beautiful. Her initial surprise melts into genuine pleasure. A warm blush spreads across her face as she smiles, replying that she is happy to hear him say that. She stammers, covering her blushing face with her hands. Flustered by the prince's compliment, she manages to reply that he, too, is very elegant. Nearby, Maya and another maid observe the interaction. The other maid remarks how different Lieselot seems from the legendary Frostvale maiden Lisbeth of the epic tales, questioning if it's truly her. As they proceed down a long hall, Prince Rudolph suddenly stops, remembering something. He tells Maya that he has something to give her, reaching into his coat. Before he can retrieve the item, a voice cuts through the air. A confident young man with dark hair leans in a doorway, casually greeting Lieselot by name. He steps forward, his attention solely on her. He explains he was worried since he hadn't heard from her, adding that she looks even more beautiful than usual. He then declares that just as the hero Wilhelm and his love Lisbeth were fated to be together, so are they. Turning slightly, he places a dismissive hand on Prince Rudolph's shoulder, remarking to Lieselot that he sees she is a guest. Rudolph stands his ground, looking the intruder in the eye. He demands to know who he is and tells him to get out of their way, asking if the man is incapable of reading the room. The man merely smirks, unconcerned. From the side, Maya watches in horror, realizing the man truly believes that he and Lieselot are in love with each other. Suddenly, Lieselot's expression transforms into one of cold fury. Her eyes widen menacingly as playing cards appear in her hand. She seizes the man's wrist and snarls a command. "Don't you touch Prince Rudolph." Her ferocious declaration hangs in the air, leaving both the arrogant newcomer and Prince Rudolph utterly stunned into silence. She scoffs at the rival's assertion that they are fated to be together, telling him not to make her laugh. Glaring at him with contempt, she calls him a swindler, accusing him of defiling her precious memories. She then turns, positioning herself protectively before Prince Rudolph. She announces firmly that she's engaged to the prince and demands the rival get away from her fiancé, much to the other man's confusion. The prince is left stunned by the exchange. He internally questions the history between them, realizing that her talk of defiled memories and her previously stated hatred for the hero Wilhelm suggests this is no simple lover's quarrel. His mind connects her words to the epic of Wilhelm, recalling a memory from their childhood. He remembers intervening when a young Lieselot was being harassed, and as a prince, he offered her a brooch to comfort her. He reflects on a famous story from the epic, where the hero gave a brooch and was reunited with his love 10 years later. Rudolph realizes this romanticized tale doesn't fit his own past. He concludes the historians must have dramatized the events. The rival's voice cuts through his thoughts, addressing Lieselot. He asks if she recalls the question from his letter. "What did I give you on the day that we met?" He declares that he remembers, holding up a small, dark gem. Before he can finish, Lieselot states with cold finality that what he holds was not a brooch. The rival reels back, shouting that it's impossible and accusing her of deception. He insists that he was definitely given a brooch and refuses to hear her excuses. Defeated, he says he will leave for the day and asks to see her again. Lieselot's reply is a sharp and absolute "don't ever." The final rejection leaves him stunned and speechless, his hand clenched in frustration. Having decisively dealt with her suitor, Lieselot stands firm, her expression severe. Behind her, Prince Rudolph looks on, utterly stunned by the turn of events. As she turns away, Rudolph continues to stare, his mind reeling. He internally admits that this is too different from the history he knows. He simply doesn't understand what is happening. This confusion leads him to a shocking thought. Could his actions have rewritten history itself? He immediately dismisses the notion, reasoning that the past should not be affected by his present deeds. He grasps for another explanation. Perhaps the famous story about the brooch was fabricated by historians. He considers that they likely exaggerated the relationship between Wilhelm and Lisbeth to make it more sensational, even inventing claims that he had treated her roughly. His thoughts spiral as he applies this to his own situation. Lieselot introduced him as her fiancé, but in the historical epic, it is Wilhelm who pursues Lisbeth. He imagines a comical inversion where he is rejected by Lisbeth, who declares her love for Wilhelm instead. A horrifying realization dawns on him. If the roles are reversed, then he has become the man who stole Lisbeth from Wilhelm, just like the villain in the history he knows. He panics, thinking that at this rate, he might be assassinated by Wilhelm, or someone acting in his stead, out of sheer hatred, regardless of whether he becomes emperor or not. Shaking himself from his frantic thoughts, Rudolph decides the situation is too dangerous to ignore. He turns to Lieselot, asking forgiveness for his forwardness, but insists on knowing what her relationship is with the man she just dismissed. Lieselot doesn't answer. Instead, She apologizes for the trouble she caused. With tears welling in her eyes, she looks at him and makes a shocking demand: end the engagement. As Rudolph stands speechless, she presses him, her expression a mixture of sorrow and resolve. She tells him to say the words, but he is canceling their engagement, reminding him that they go back a long way. Her tearful demand hangs in the air, but Rudolph, looking at her pained expression, refuses to accept it at face value. He realizes her acting suggests this is far more complex than a simple past lover. He leans in, his voice filled with urgency, and pleads for her to tell him everything. He immediately questions his own outburst, wondering to himself why he is saying this. Liselott, meanwhile, remains silent, her tear-filled eyes wide with unspoken sorrow. She quietly asks what transpired between him and the other man. But her train of thought is broken when Rudolph calls out her name, his voice sharp with concern. The sound jolts her, and she realizes the depth of her own despair is showing on her face, a look that would not be received well. Her expression of anguish triggers a sudden, powerful thought in Rudolph's mind. He does not want to see Lisbeth make that face. In that moment, he understands that despite everything, she hasn't truly changed at all. Acting on this conviction, he kneels before her. He speaks of his own precious memories, which he feels have been defiled by that man's presence. Seeing his resolve, Liselott's demeanor shifts. Now, composed, she sits before him and formally asks if he would be willing to listen to her story. Liselott begins to share her story with Prince Rudolph, her expression somber. She explains that the event happened 9 years ago, when she was 5 years old. It was a memory from a time her father took her to the imperial palace, a memory she feels was defiled by Wilhelm. The memory transports to that day. A 5-year-old Liselott, holding her father's hand, marvels at the beautiful flowers in the palace garden. As she runs ahead in excitement, her father, Marquis Douglas, calls out, cautioning her not to run so fast lest she fall. Despite his warning, the young girl trips and tumbles forward. Her father cries out her name in alarm, but she quickly picks herself up, insisting that she is fine and it is no big deal. Pleased with her resilience, her father calls her a good girl. The memory deepens, recalling how he gave her a special amulet. He explained it was a Falkrantz family tradition, an item carried by the First Lord during war, said to grant the wishes of its bearer. He entrusted it to her care. Later, inside the palace, the Marquis tells his daughter he must go discuss an important matter. He instructs her to stay in the grand room and read until he gets back, before joining a group of other nobles. Left alone on the large, ornate chair, young Liselott quickly grows bored and puffs her cheeks out in a frustrated pout. Her boredom gives way to curiosity. She slips out of the room and begins to wander through the vast, echoing hallways of the palace, wondering where the garden might be. Her wandering leads her into a large, empty, and dimly lit hall. Realizing she is completely lost, she calls out in confusion, her voice small in the immense space. Suddenly, 2 figures appear before her, a young boy and his attendant. The attendant, noting he's never seen her before, coldly states that she is in the imperial palace and that all intruders are put to death, causing Liselott to recoil in fear. The boy, Prince Robin, silences his attendant. A cruel smile spreads across his face as he states he was looking for someone to test his new swordsmanship on. He orders both his men to capture the girl. When one hesitates, suggesting she might be a guest daughter, Robin furiously tells him to hurry up, threatening to use him as the target instead. Liselott cries out in terror as they close in. At Prince Robin's command, his men gave chase. A terrified young Liselott fled, her mind racing with confusion and fear as the guards shouted for her to stop. She sprinted down a long, empty corridor, crying out for help. Just as despair began to set in, a hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, a voice calling to her from an unseen doorway. The hand pulled her into a small room just as Prince Robin and his attendant rushed past, demanding to know where she had gone. Inside, Liselott found herself with a boy her age. He put a finger to his lips, whispering for her to be quiet and confirming that the men outside were after her. He offered a gentle smile, reassuring her that she would be safe in this hiding spot. After a moment, the boy peeked out the door, checking the hallway before turning back to announce that no one was there. With the immediate danger gone, he turned to the startled Liselott and asked where she had been trying to go in the first place. After she answered, he led her not back into the palace halls, but out into a magnificent, sun-drenched garden. Liselott gasped in awe at the sight. She shyly asked if she could pick some of the flowers, and the boy readily agreed. The 2 children sat together peacefully amidst the flower beds, the earlier terror replaced by a quiet, shared joy. Using the flowers she had gathered, Liselott crafted a delicate crown and gently placed it upon the boy's head. They both shared a bright, happy smile. Their idyllic moment was shattered. From their hiding spot behind a hedge, Liselott's eyes widened in fear as she spotted Prince Robin and his attendant in the distance, still searching. Reacting instantly, the boy shoved Liselott back into the bushes, urging her to be quiet and stay hidden. As he did, a hand lunged from off-panel, grabbing him forcefully. He is forced to his knees by one of his brother's henchmen. From her hiding spot in the bushes, Liselott watches in horror. The third prince, Robin, smirks down at Rudolph, remarking that he was wondering who was in the garden and questioning if someone like Rudolph is even allowed there. Robin adds with false pleasantry that whatever the case, he's a nice guy. As Robin continues to use another of his men as a human footstool, he addresses his younger brother with a derogatory name, calling him a pig. He then asks if Rudolph has seen a girl around his age nearby. His gaze fixed on the ground, Rudolph denies having seen anyone. Lieselot's eyes widen in shock from her hiding place. Robin seems to accept the answer, saying he sees before dismissing the thought. But his acceptance is a ruse. With sudden violence, Robin pivots and kicks Rudolph squarely in the face, sending him sprawling. He sneers that he should have known trash like Rudolph would lie so easily, adding that something about him seems off. Reeling from the blow, Rudolph clutches his bruised face. Robin impatiently orders his men to hurry up and hold him down. The henchman sees the young prince. Robin grabs a handful of Rudolph's hair, yanking his head back and demanding he reveal the girl's location. He promises to stop the abuse if Rudolph complies. Hidden and helpless, Lieselot can only watch in anguish, wondering why he is being subjected to such cruelty. The brutal interrogation is cut short when an attendant nervously informs His Highness that the noon bell is ringing, signaling it is time for lunch. With a dismissive humph, Robin decides to forget it and walks away with his entourage, leaving Rudolph behind. Once they are gone, Lieselot emerges from her hiding place and hurries to Rudolph's side. She asks if he is okay and apologizes for pushing him earlier. Still kneeling on the ground, he reassures her with a small, pained smile that he is fine, as he is used to such treatment. Her expression falls, and tears begin to stream down her face. Surprised, Rudolph asks why she is crying. Through her sobs, she explains that hearing him say he is used to being hit is what made her cry, insisting that anyone would weep at such a sad admission. He is taken aback, a profound realization dawning on him. He had never thought someone would cry for him. This is a first. As a token of her gratitude for saving her, Lieselot offers him a beautiful, ornate gold coin. She explains that her father told her it would make her wishes come true. He thanks her for the coin, but she interrupts, explaining that he paid attention to her. Lieselot reveals that if the coin is meant to grant wishes, one of hers has already come true. A younger Rudolph, confused, asks what wish she made. The memory fades, leaving the present day, Lieselot standing alone. She thinks back to how a servant found them in the garden, and the boy ran off before she could even ask his name. The realization hits her, and she whispers in disbelief, "No way, that can't be true." Simultaneously, Rudolph reflects on the girl from the imperial palace who gave him the gold coin 9 years ago. He remembers being harshly scolded by his father afterward and concludes there is no way that girl could be Lieselot. His thoughts darken, recalling the prophecy that in 10 years, Lieselot will become the Frostvale maiden and kill him. His train of thought is shattered when Lieselot holds up an identical gold coin. With wide, hopeful eyes, she asks if he has one too. Rudolph stares, first at the coin in her hand and then at the one he possesses, his expression one of utter shock. The confirmation overwhelms him. Tears stream down Rudolph's face as he remembers the countless times of struggle, hardship, and pain, moments where he felt he was on the verge of breaking completely. In a surge of emotion, he closes the distance and embraces a startled Lieselot. He confesses that it was because of the coin and his memories of her that he was able to endure and remain himself. He holds her tightly, tearfully thanking her for saving him and for paying attention to him, finally able to express the gratitude he's held for so long. Lieselot, her own eyes welling with tears, tells him she feels the same way. They kneel together in their shared, emotional reunion. The intense moment breaks as Rudolph, suddenly flustered, pulls back slightly. He stammers that it's time to go, abruptly remembering his own birthday party. A flustered Lieselot agrees, and they move to leave the room. Before they can leave, Rudolph's expression turns serious. He asks her directly about her relationship with a man named Wilhelm. Lieselot's demeanor instantly shifts, her face shadowing over as she coldly replies that Wilhelm is proof of her own stupidity. Rudolph is stunned by her answer as his mind flashes to an image of a solitary man walking down a long, dark hall. Unseen, a rival noble watches them from a doorway, his fist clenched in anger. He internally questions why this is happening, realizing that at this rate, Lieselot will marry Rudolph. Though he tells himself it should not be wrong, his frustration is palpable as he mutters that it's fine, denying his own feelings. His gaze hardened with malicious certainty as he foresaw the inevitable. This, he declared, was the history that would unfold, a future with no place for Rudolph. A grim vision solidified his conviction. Lieselot, sword in hand, standing over the prince's fallen, bloodied form. He was certain Rudolph would die at her hands. The prince, as if hearing the unspoken threat, turned with wide-eyed shock. A stunning realization hit him. There was another person who knew the history of the future. Lieselot begins to tell Rudolph everything. She explains that her foolish younger self met the man she believed to be Wilhelm at a party about a year ago. In the memory, a younger Lieselot stands apart from the crowd, looking reserved as others plead for her attention. In her recollection, she was swarmed by obnoxious suitors demanding a dance or a song. With a sharp gesture, she forcefully pushed them away, ordering them to get out of her face. Returning to the present, she explains to Rudolph that at the time, She was too young to hire an investigator and felt she was at the end of her rope in her search for him. Her desperation had fueled her resolve. In the memory, she stood determined, having finally spotted the one she was looking for across the room. That was the moment she found him. A man with reddish hair then approached her through the crowd, holding a single rose. With a dazzling smile, he declared, "At last we met. My destined soulmate." Unimpressed, Lieselot stared at him coldly. She asked who he was, stating bluntly that she had no interest in shallow men who reeked of dishonesty. The man simply chuckled, remarking on her harshness. He then asked if she had truly forgotten him, reminding her of a blissful moment they supposedly shared 8 years prior in the Imperial Garden. On a day, the white jasmine bloomed. The suggestion left Lieselot utterly stunned. The man continued, claiming his hair color was the same as when they first met. He explained that he is the only one in his family with hair of this color, and to quell the resulting rumors, he dyed it red. He then turned the question on her, asking about her original hair color. Back in the present, Lieselot confesses to Rudolph how the man repeated his declaration of being her destined soulmate. She admits that her intense longing to meet Wilhelm had clouded her judgment, causing her to trust this man blindly. She concludes with an embarrassed blush, telling Rudolph that since that day, she has been meeting with this man regularly, about once a month for tea. As Lieselot finished her story, Prince Rudolph's face twisted in irritation. He found himself inexplicably annoyed by this Wilhelm, a feeling that made Lieselot visibly anxious. She immediately began to apologize profusely, waving her hands in a panic. She misinterpreted his anger as being directed at her, berating herself for being stupid enough to trust a liar and assuming he must be disappointed. He quickly reassured her that his anger wasn't for her, urging her to continue her story. Internally, however, Rudolph was furious with his past self. Lieselot, embarrassed, collected herself to proceed. As she spoke, Rudolph puzzled over the inconsistencies. The imposter's physical features were all wrong, yet he somehow knew the story of their first meeting. Lieselot explained that while she initially trusted the man, doubts began to grow. She recalled finally confronting him, asking about the gift she had given Rudolph on the day they first met, and questioning if he had even bothered to keep it. She had called out to the man she believed was Wilhelm, her question hanging in the air between them as he looked back with a stern expression. The imposter had given a smooth reply, claiming the memories were too precious and that he kept the gift protected so it wouldn't be damaged. Rudolph realized with a start that this was the exact opposite of the truth. At the time, she had simply accepted his explanation, her expression somber as she replied, "Is that so?" Rudolph began to speak, but Lieselot continued her account. She explained that since that day, she had asked the imposter about the gift several times, but he always dodged the question, causing her own doubts to deepen little by little. Later, in his study, Rudolph recounted the tale to his maid, Maya. She listened intently before offering her own perspective, noting that the man Lieselot described seemed far too different from the Wilhelm of Rudolph's own memories. She voiced the crucial question, was this man truly the boy from his past? She then proposed a course of action. If the man was an imposter, then the real Wilhelm from Rudolph's memories must still exist. She suggested infiltrating the palace where they first met, believing it might hold a clue. Lieselot, present for the discussion, agreed that it was a valid point. She enthusiastically accepts the mission to infiltrate the palace, declaring that she will accomplish it. Prince Rudolph, however, is taken aback by the request, shouting for them to wait a second while Lieselot calmly asks Maya to proceed. A sudden realization strikes Lieselot, who covers her mouth as she exclaims that Maya must have been Rudolph's agent. Maya herself appears flustered by the sudden accusation. Rudolph acknowledges that Maya was indeed more capable than he had expected. Lieselot, however, dismisses the idea of Maya being a spy, stating that Maya has been her maid and bodyguard since childhood and would have definitely sensed if a rat were present. She declares the notion impossible. Rudolph then pivots back to the central mystery. If Maya is the only one who knows their history, how did the imposter Wilhelm learn about their past? Lieselot explains her reasoning. She suspected Rudolph might be the boy from her memories and accepted the engagement to confirm it. At their meeting, she knew it was him, noting that he even saw a gold coin she tried to hide. Lieselot continues, recounting how she dealt with the false Wilhelm. She had Maya deliver a letter to sever all ties. In a flashback, the imposter reacts with shock and disbelief as Maya informs him that Lieselot will have no further meetings with him. In that same confrontation, Maya pressed the man for a crucial piece of information, asking him what item Lieselot had given him on the day they supposedly met. The imposter's face darkens as he recalls the moment. He answers that the gift was a brooch. Upon hearing this incorrect answer, Maya's expression hardens with the certainty of his deception. Returning to the present, Lieselot finishes her explanation to Rudolph. With that failed test, it was confirmed that the man had been deceiving her. He processes this new information, a theory forming in his mind. He wonders aloud if the imposter was also at the palace that day, perhaps witnessing them playing in the garden. This would explain how the man knew some details, but not everything. His thoughts continue to race. The imposter had always dodged the question about the gift, only answering a brooch in a moment of desperation. Rudolph theorizes that the man might have seen Lieselot give him something from a distance, but not clearly enough to identify it. The crucial question remains, why would he go to such lengths? Rudolph suspects the answer lies in something more important. He considered the immense power of the Quirce family, the symbol of the empire's military might. For any aristocrat or royal aiming to dominate the empire, their strength was the ultimate prize. Marrying Lisbeth would mean gaining the support of this powerful house. Historically, it was with the Quirce family's backing that the hero Wilhelm had destroyed the old empire and established a new kingdom after the death of Emperor Rudolf. As he pondered their influence, a darker thought took root. Could the imposter Wilhelm's scheme have also involved manipulating Lieselot into assassinating him? Elsewhere, Maya furiously defended her mistress, declaring that Lieselot was not at fault. She insisted the blame lay with the man who had used and trampled on their memories. Lieselot, however, let out a pained laugh, telling Maya she must be disappointed to serve such a foolish woman. Just then, Prince Rudolph appeared, gently telling Lieselot to forget about that man. He reminded her that it was, after all, her birthday party. Lieselot sniffled, trying to compose herself as they walked down the palace corridor. Their arrival in the main hall sent a ripple of shock through the assembled guests, whose faces turned in unison with stunned expressions. The whispers started immediately. While some admired that Lieselot was as beautiful as ever, others were aghast. They couldn't understand why she would appear with someone like him, the tyrant prince. Lieselot informed Rudolph that she needed to greet her guests, and he agreed to see her later. Nearby, a group of young women gossiped, one mentioning that the engagement was the emperor's decision, though she didn't know why. Another added that the engagement hadn't even been officially announced yet. He watched her depart, deciding it was best not to stir up any more rumors. He would simply be a fly on the wall for the remainder of the evening. From his place on the sidelines, Rudolph watched as Lieselot moved through the party, gracefully greeting the various nobles in attendance. Though she performed her duties flawlessly, a hint of weariness touched her expression. This subtlety was lost on the other guests, two of whom stood by, utterly captivated and struck dumb by her presence. The grand hall was filled with the sounds of polite conversation and lively music from a small ensemble. Guests in fine attire mingled, some enjoying the food while others engaged in quiet discussion, creating a vibrant, aristocratic atmosphere. As the music swelled, couples took to the floor, moving in graceful, practiced steps. Gentlemen led their partners in a waltz, a classic display of high society elegance. Away from the dancing, Prince Rudolph watched the proceedings with a thoughtful expression. A dance. He had always been isolated at such gatherings, a solitary figure in the corner. This was the first time he found himself truly observing the festivities. His thoughts were suddenly derailed as Lieselot appeared before him. Panic flared within the prince. The only dances he knew were from village festivals 3 centuries in the future. The instruments and tempo here were entirely different, rendering his knowledge useless. He decided he would have to refuse if asked. But as he listened closer, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. Rudolphsima, Lieselot began, her cheeks flushed as she looked at him expectantly. Are you not going to invite me to dance? Lieselot correctly guesses the source of Prince Rudolph's anxiety, asking if he is worried about the dance. He stammers, admitting that he has, in fact, never danced before. Hearing his confession, she smiles reassuringly and offers to be his first partner. Rudolph is taken aback by the offer. She begins to instruct him, telling him to listen to the music, follow the rhythm, straighten his back, and simply follow her lead. As they begin to dance, other guests watch with disdain, questioning why Lady Lieselot is dancing with the tyrant prince. Rudolph, overwhelmed, stumbles and bumps into another guest. He quickly apologizes as Lieselot also expresses her regret. The mistake sends him into a spiral of self-loathing. Monstrous, mocking voices fill his mind, calling him a filthy pig who is unworthy of being with Lieselot. In stark contrast to his inner turmoil, Lieselot's voice remains kind and patient, encouraging him to try once more. His thoughts drift as he watches their silhouettes dance under a spotlight, questioning if he can truly be with someone like her. He continues to brood, acknowledging that while she welcomed him, he cannot know her true thoughts. His eyes catch Marquis Douglas, who watches with clear disapproval. The whispers of the crowd confirm his fears, mocking his lack of experience and how he is completely off the beat. The prince sees an unbridgeable gap between them, she a high-class flower, and he, the palace's outcast. In a moment of dark ambition, a thought flashes through his mind. To close this gap, perhaps he should just become the emperor, just as Wilhelm did in the historical records. His dark reverie is shattered by Lieselot's voice. She gently reminds him that when one is dancing, they're supposed to look at their partner's face. Her simple instruction startles him, pulling him back to the present moment. Pulled from his thoughts, he quickly apologizes and agrees to try again, giving a small thumbs up. But as he does, a sudden realization strikes him, his eyes widening in shock. Before he can process his realization, Lieselot gently turns his face toward hers. She tells him he shouldn't look away from her, then adds a confounding statement, that he has always been looking only at her. Rudolph is left blushing and utterly bewildered. He continues to lead Lieselot, their movements now surprisingly in sync. The onlookers are taken aback. Marquis Douglas Fauckrance expresses his disbelief, noting that it's incredibly difficult for a beginner to synchronize their breathing in a dance and questioning who led whom. The rival noble dismisses it as a fluke, but another young lady remarks that Prince Rudolph looks rather cool. Despite the whispers, they move as one, a whirlwind of motion across the ballroom floor, their expressions a mixture of intense concentration and burgeoning confidence. A shared breathless smile breaks across both their faces, a moment of pure, unadulterated joy in the midst of their shared effort. As the music ends, they strike a final pose, met with a wave of applause from the assembled court. Moments later, Rudolph collapses into a chair, panting heavily. He reflects with relief that he managed to finish the dance without stepping on Lieselot's feet. Maya approaches, praising him for a wonderful performance and saying she never would have guessed it was his first time dancing. She offers him a drink, noting he must be tired. He accepts her thanks, but his mind drifts back to the dance. He realizes that the memory of a village festival dance, which he initially thought would be useless, had come to his aid. Though the instruments and tempo were different, the core melody, rhythm, and steps were surprisingly similar. He recalls the lively scene of commoners dancing and playing music, a memory from years past. It was thanks to this unexpected recollection that he was able to navigate the formal court dance. With the realization, a long sigh of relief escapes him. That small success galvanizes him. A new resolve hardens in his eyes as he realizes he can change his fate. He vows to himself that even if history is destined for him to die as a dread emperor, he will rewrite it. He clenches his fist, a determined smile gracing his lips. He will rewrite his dark destiny into a small, happy history where he can stay with Lisbeth forever. His moment of quiet resolve is broken by a voice asking to speak with him. Startled, Rudolph looks up from his seat, a fleeting image of his joyful dance, with Lieselot still fresh in his mind. His expression quickly shifts to one of shock and alarm. The source of his shock is the imposing figure of Marquis Douglas Fauckrance, Lieselot's own father. The Marquis apologizes for not having greeted the prince properly earlier. Rudolph, taken aback by the man's sudden appearance, stammers that he is the one who should be apologizing. Meanwhile, a young noblewoman observes the prince from afar, her face flushed. She internally reflects on the dance, admitting she was shocked to see such a serious expression on Rudolph's face, and found herself captivated, feeling she could get lost in his amber eyes. Seeing an opportunity, she approaches the prince, pushing a glass of fruit water toward him. She insists that he must be tired and presses him to drink, questioning if he had even heard her. Before Rudolph can respond, the Marquis cuts through the interruption, his voice firm. He clarifies his purpose for approaching the prince. He wishes to request one match. The proposal shocks the young woman and draws the attention of Lieselot, who appears and confronts her father. Rudolph himself is left completely stunned, his mind racing to understand the Marquis's true plot. In a grand courtyard, Prince Rudolph prepares for what is described as a sparring session with Marquis Douglas, though it is framed as official training. The Marquis offers him a wooden sword. As Rudolph takes it, he is surprised by its weight, noting it is his first time holding such a weapon. He hesitates, prompting the Marquis to ask if something is wrong. He examines the weapon more closely, observing that the wooden sword looks as though it has been used for years. The Marquis's face remains shadowed and severe as he watches the prince's assessment. The Marquis confirms the sword's age, explaining that it is part of his daily routine. He has swung it 1,000 times a day since he was a child. A dark, powerful aura erupts around him as he demonstrates his stance, his expression one of intense, focused menace. The sheer killing intent radiating from the man strikes Rudolph with the force of a physical blow, filling his mind with a singular, terrifying premonition: death. His mind races, connecting the Marquis's palpable hostility to his vocal disapproval of the engagement. He recalls the Marquis shouting that he would never accept his daughter marrying a tyrant prince. Rudolph realizes with dawning horror that the Marquis might be planning to use this training as an opportunity to stage a fatal accident. As Rudolph stands frozen, Lieselot recalls the terrifying truth about her father. He is the Obsidian War Demon, the Empire's strongest warrior, whose opponents are left as nothing but mangled corpses. Horrified, she screams for Prince Rudolph not to go through with it. Despite her plea, he acknowledges his own fear. He is terrified, but he understands that he cannot run from his confrontation. Seeing his determination, Lieselot moves to step between them, but her mother, Teresa, holds her back, telling her to stop. Lieselot defiantly refuses, declaring that she will not stand aside. Before the situation can escalate, he raises his voice, proposing a new condition for their duel. He declares that if he can land just one single blow on the Marquis's body with the wooden sword, he will be declared the winner. He accepts the Marquis's unspoken challenge, understanding the man's supreme confidence that he cannot even be grazed. As Teresa gives the signal to begin, Rudolph steels his resolve, knowing that running away is no longer an option. He charges forward, wooden sword held ready. However, the prince has a critical disadvantage. No one has ever formally taught him swordsmanship. Instead, he has learned everything through sheer imitation, secretly observing the knights, training, and practicing what he saw. With a desperate cry, He puts all his unrefined skill into the attack, but Marquis Douglas remains utterly unimpressed. As their silhouettes meet, the Marquis's weapon strikes with a sharp crack, knocking Rudolph's sword from his grasp. The prince stumbles, clutching his hand in pain. Looming over him, the Marquis delivers a single, cold command. Next, the brutal lesson continues. Again and again, Rudolph charges with a desperate scream, only to be struck down. Each time he falls, the Marquis repeats his command, forcing the prince back to his feet. His face contorts in a scream of exertion and pain as another blow connects, the relentless demand to continue echoing in his ears. With a powerful swing, the Marquis sends Rudolph flying backward through the air, completely overwhelmed. He crashes to the ground, defeated. Lying face down in the dirt, a single thought cuts through the pain. Impossible. The Marquis stands over him, his expression one of pure contempt. He looks at the bruised and battered prince and asks, "Is that all you've got, Prince Rudolph?" He continues his cold lecture, stating that with such a pathetic level of strength, Rudolph will never be able to protect what is important to him. As the words land, an image of his fiancée, Lieselotte, appears in the prince's mind. As he lay defeated on the stone courtyard, Lieselotte rushed forward, pleading for her fiancé's tormentor to stop. Marquis Douglas, however, simply held up a hand and commanded her not to interfere. Despite her plea, the prince began to push himself up, leaning on his wooden sword for support. He recalled his vow to resist his own fate. His mind raced, reviewing his knowledge of history. In the original timeline, he was certain he wouldn't die until he was 25. However, his engagement to Lieselotte had fundamentally changed that history, creating a new, unknown present. He now understood that he was in a position where his life could be taken at any moment. This realization brought a chilling secondary thought. Lieselotte, who was now by his side, could also be in danger. This clarity settled over him. He looked up at the Marquis, who observed him with a flicker of curiosity. The prince finally understood the reason for this brutal training. Panting heavily, he declared that the Marquis was testing him, testing whether he truly possessed the strength and the resolve to protect Lieselotte. Tears of pain and frustration mixed with the sweat on his face, but his eyes burned with defiance as he shouted, "I can still go on." With a desperate roar, he lunged forward, thrusting his sword toward the Marquis. The older man watched him passively, thinking to himself that such a reckless thrust from an exhausted body could be avoided even with his eyes closed. Instead of dodging, the Marquis caught the tip of the wooden blade between his thumb and forefinger. Rudolph froze, his eyes wide with shock. The Marquis, however, recognized the pressure for what it was, not mere desperation, but true killing intent. A look of disdain crossed the Marquis's face. With a sharp exclamation of, "What?" he tightened his grip, and the wooden sword shattered into splinters before the prince's stunned eyes. He remains on his knees, stunned, the shattered pieces of his wooden sword scattered on the floor around him. Marquis Douglas stands impassively over the defeated prince. From down the corridor, a frantic cry of, "Your Highness," shatters the tense silence. The sound echoes through the long, empty hallway, where ornate lamps cast a dim, solitary light. The corridor leads towards the prince's chambers, which now stand unoccupied and still. Arriving at the scene is Lieselotte, her face a mask of pure fury. She confronts her father, her voice trembling with rage as she demands to know if it was truly necessary to go so far. Her father turns to face her, his expression unyielding. He explains that after their spar, he felt he had no choice but to test the prince, considering his high station, to see if he was worthy of being entrusted with his beloved daughter. Lieselotte angrily retorts that the prince's swordsmanship and physical skills are those of a complete beginner, but only because no one has ever paid him any attention, not because he is lazy. The Marquis calmly agrees, saying he knows, before directing her gaze back toward the prince. He holds up the splintered piece of the wooden sword, explaining that its breaking was no accident. He notes that while the old sword was at its durability limit, His Highness had intentionally aimed for that specific outcome. The Marquis recalls the duel, realizing that what appeared to be the prince's random strikes were actually a deliberate strategy. He now understands he was being guided to block every attack on the exact same spot. He concludes that it was a gamble on the prince's part to see if the focused assault would indeed break the sword. Lieselotte listens, her anger dissolving into stunned surprise at this revelation. She listens as her father continues his praise, explaining that what His Highness showed was the ability to judge the old age of the wooden sword and still find an opening, even when faced with a hopeless difference in skill. He grips the hilt of his own sword, a thrill running through him. It has been a long time since he felt the excitement of battle. He declares that His Highness is a diamond in the rough. With the right polishing, he will shine. Meanwhile, in a quiet room, Prince Rudolph murmurs softly in his sleep, completely unaware of the high praise being bestowed upon him. He begins to stir, his eyes fluttering open to the sight of a concerned face leaning over him. He groggily recognizes her, calling out to Lisbeth Dano, while she addresses him as Your Highness. He tries to sit up, wincing from the effort and groaning in pain. Lieselotte immediately presses on his shoulder, gently urging him not to move yet. He freezes, a sudden realization dawning on him. His head is resting in her lap. His face flushes as he processes her proximity, internally panicking and wondering if receiving a lap pillow from one's fiancé is normal for aristocrats of this era. Her own composure is visibly strained, a blush creeping up her neck. She clenches a fist, telling herself not to force the situation, terrified at the thought of what her father, the Marquis, would do if he were to see them in such an intimate position. After a tense silence, Rudolph's memory of the duel returns. He looks up at Liselott and asks what happened with the match, his most pressing question being whether he had earned her father's approval. Elsewhere, unaware of the prince's question, Marquis Douglas lets out a soft chuckle. He remarks that he can no longer just sit back and watch. He expresses pity for how Rudolph must have been treated in the palace, acknowledging that the prince's pressure and tactical sense were remarkable. Liselott, standing nearby, looks on in confusion. He turns to his daughter, his expression serious. He declares that this matter now concerns his precious daughter and his son. With gravity, he issues a command, stay by Prince Rudolph's side, Lisbeth. The order leaves her utterly stunned. She sits by his side, his head still resting in her lap, and informs him that he has won. Her father, she explains, has now acknowledged him. Lying back, Prince Rudolph quietly expresses his gladness. He looks up at her, a blush spreading across his face as he offers a simple, heartfelt thank you. A faint blush also colors her own cheeks as she looks down, softly praising him for doing well. A quiet moment passes between them in the softly lit room, the prince still resting in his fiancée's care. Elsewhere, under the light of the full moon, the maid Maya lets out a cry of pure frustration. She laments loudly that she had desperately wanted to attend Lady Liselott's birthday party. She continues her lament to her fellow maids, explaining that she had been tasked by His Highness to retrieve the birthday present. Her real desire, she confesses, was to witness the moment Prince Rudolph presented the gift to Lady Liselott. Her friends listen with amusement. One imagines the prince praising such a talented maid for finding a wonderful ring, while another playfully pictures the aquamarine ring on a baby. Giggling, Maya brushes off their teasing, though she can't hide her pleasure. Back in the prince's chambers, the room is quiet. Rudolph internally apologizes to Maya, acknowledging that he cannot give Liselott the present just yet. The reason is simple. He is still resting with his head in Liselott's lap. As she gently cups his face, he decides he wants to remain just like this for a little longer, savoring the peaceful intimacy. 2 weeks have passed since Liselott's chaotic birthday. In a sunlit gazebo, Prince Rudolph sits with his fiancée, quietly wondering how she will receive his belated present. As he presents the gift, Liselott's eyes sparkle. She admires the beautiful ring, thanking the prince profusely and promising to cherish it forever. Nearby, Maya beams with pride, impressed by the stunning piece and internally taking credit for its selection, noting it must have been chosen by an exceptionally talented maid. Maya then remarks how surprised she was to see him return to the party with his face swollen. Rudolph apologizes for the poor timing, explaining he had wanted to give her the ring on her actual birthday. Liselott quickly dismisses the apology, reassuring him that with everything that happened that day, it was perfectly understandable. She continues, confessing how happy she is to see him again and how much her heart ached during their time apart. As Rudolph and Liselott share a tender moment, Maya watches them, sensing the deep affection between the two. Lost in their own world, the couple seems to have forgotten their chaperone. Maya stands off to the side, muttering with mild exasperation that she is, in fact, still there. Her presence is soon acknowledged when Liselott turns to Rudolph to ask about his future plans. Before he can answer, Maya loudly clears her throat, interrupting the private conversation to bring them back to the pressing matter at hand. She assures the prince that she has checked the surroundings and there are no eavesdroppers nearby. Rudolph acknowledges her thoroughness but holds up a hand, signaling that before he discusses his strategy, he has a different point to make. His expression becomes serious. He states that while he trusts Maya's assessment, it doesn't matter if there are no spies, because he actually wants his enemies to be listening. He then reveals his plan. He is thinking of joining forces with someone from the royal family. The bold declaration startles Liselott. Rudolph clarifies his intention, specifying that he plans to approach one of his 3 older brothers. These 3 brothers are formidable figures in their own right. The first prince, Frederick, holds unshakable power through finance, diplomacy, and the backing of the central nobility. The second prince, Oscar, commands the martial nobility, giving him immense influence in times of war. And the third prince, Robin, secures his power through an engagement to the House of Anderson, guardians of the vital western trade routes. He explains that each of his brothers is aiming for the throne and seeks the power of the Ferencrantz family, which commands the greatest military in the empire. The prince reflects that until his engagement to Liselott, he had no power. Now, however, he has become a key figure in the succession struggle, whose actions could drastically shift the balance of power between the 3. Hearing this, Maya asks if he intends to use this as leverage to elevate his own position in the palace. Liselott immediately grasps the strategic implication. For the 3 princes, joining forces with Rudolph is the quickest path to the throne. He quickly clarifies his true intention. He has no interest in the throne or any position in the palace. Instead, he wants to join forces with someone who can ensure his safety, And to do that, he must make it known that he has no ambitions of his own. Lieselot realizes this was why he was concerned about spies earlier. Rudolph confirms this, explaining that if his brother's spies overhear and report his lack of ambition, any of them who are interested will have to approach him directly. Maya brightly realizes this is where she comes in, but Rudolph points out that since no one is currently listening, they must take other measures. He asks Maya to handle spreading the rumors, a task she accepts with gusto, declaring it her specialty. Rudolph then turns to Lieselot and apologizes for using her family's reputation, but she dismisses it, noting that his words make it clear he truly has no interest in the throne. Based on this, she asks him a direct question. If that is the case, what are his plans for the future? He admits that right after recovering from the poison, all he wanted was a quiet life in the countryside with a small territory, free from the throne and royal family. Lieselot asks if he feels differently now. He looks at her and confirms that he does. He explains that a quiet life is no longer enough, as people would still seek to kill him or use him. His motivation has changed, he declares, because now he has someone he needs to protect. Prince Rudolph's eyes burn with a newfound intensity. A silent, firm declaration echoes in his mind. He wants power, the power to stand against any threat, not only to protect himself, but to shield those he cares for. His quiet resolve does not go unnoticed. Lieselot lets out a soft, amused chuckle, while Maya looks from her to the prince, a flicker of concern on her face as she remarks that the path he has chosen is certainly not an easy one. Her concern gives way to faith. Maya looks at Rudolph, acknowledging that his eyes reflect the same resolve to walk a thorny path. She sees he still has the strong heart he showed that day and reassures him that it will be all right, expressing her complete belief that he will make it through. The scene shifts, settling on the grand and imposing architecture of the Zodiac Palace, the seat of imperial power. Inside the vast throne room, Marquis Douglas Fauckrantz kneels before the emperor, thanking him for the audience. The emperor, looking down from his throne, tells him to dispense with the formalities and state his purpose. The Marquis rises and begins his explanation. He states that his business concerns Prince Rudolph and his own daughter, Lisbeth. He reminds the emperor that since they are both 14, they will be attending the Imperial Academy together the following year. He continues, laying out his proposal to foster a better relationship between the two. The Marquis formally requests that Prince Rudolph be allowed to stay at the Fauckrantz family residence. He justifies the request by explaining that if the prince is being treated poorly at the palace, the Fauckrantz family can protect him. Furthermore, he argues that a year would be sufficient time to thoroughly train the boy. The emperor listens in silence, his expression unreadable. The emperor's silence breaks with sudden violence. He slams his fist down, roaring that he will not allow it. He declares that Rudolph is still a prince of the Baldike Empire and cannot live as a guest in a vassal's house. The Marquis is stunned by the absolute refusal, questioning why, as he believed it was decided. The Marquis stares in disbelief as the emperor reveals his true, petty reason. He mentions a mistress, Beatrice, calling her that foxwoman, and claims she would be heartbroken if he were to lose his beloved son. The decision is not one of state, but of personal whim. He remains kneeling, making an alternative proposal. Since his first request was denied, he now asks that his daughter, Lisbeth, be allowed to stay by Prince Rudolph's side. He also requests that a few of her attendants be permitted entry into the imperial palace. The Marquis internally affirms that he cannot sacrifice Prince Rudolph, who is to become his son. The emperor listens from his throne, pondering the new request. He states that it pains him deeply to send Lisbeth to the imperial palace. After a moment, the emperor sighs, seemingly relenting. He supposes it cannot be helped, given how strongly the Marquis insists. Seeing an opening, the Marquis asks if this means he will allow it. He resolves that to train the prince, he can simply visit the palace daily, confident that the strong-willed Lisbeth will not be intimidated. He simply confirms with a quiet yes. From his throne at the far end of the Grand Hall, the emperor then poses a question to the distant, kneeling Marquis. Has Rudolph shown something that warrants such conviction from him? His demeanor shifts as he leans forward, suddenly intrigued. He mentions having heard about Rudolph sparring with the Obsidian War Demon, questioning if it was reckless. He then reveals that he himself had a chance to spar with the prince recently. The Marquis responds with fervor, declaring it was not reckless at all. He proclaims that with the right instructor, Prince Rudolph will eventually surpass even him. He privately notes that he seems to have piqued the emperor's interest, concluding that despite everything, His Majesty still loves his son. The emperor leans back, a wide, unsettling grin spreading across his face. He exclaims that he knew Rudolph had talent from the very beginning. The Marquis, still kneeling, is caught off guard by the reaction, thinking it was just as he suspected, yet finding it strange. His confusion turns to alarm as he focuses on the emperor's face. It is not the expression of a doting father proud of his son's talent. It is a dark, predatory look that sends a chill through the Marquis. He internally questions the meaning of this. If the emperor knew of Rudolph's talent, why didn't he support its development for the good of the royal family? Even if he didn't want a concubine son wielding power, he could have trained him as a knight to protect the other princes. The lack of logic is disturbing, and the Marquis decides it is time to leave. As he stands in the vast throne room, the emperor's voice stops him. He declares that regarding the matter of his daughter, Lord Fockrance will now owe him one. The Marquis is visibly shocked by the pronouncement, his mind reeling from the Emperor's unsettling behavior. Marquis Douglas stumbles down a long, sunlit colonnade. He slams a hand against a stone pillar in frustration, letting out a cry of "damn it." He continues his unsteady walk, tormented by the question of why the Emperor, Rudolph's own father, would treat his son with such disdain. The thought forms that perhaps Prince Rudolph was being intentionally mistreated. The pieces click into place with horrifying clarity. He realizes that the one who ignored the talented prince and created an environment where he was belittled could only have been the Emperor himself. With this new understanding, the Marquis resolves that he must now devise a plan of his own. Elsewhere, in a garden gazebo, Prince Rudolph asks Lieselot if she should be staying so long, expressing concern that her father might worry. With a bright smile, she dismisses his concern, announcing that she will be living at the palace starting today. Rudolph and his maid, Maya, cry out in shock. Maya then reveals to a stunned Rudolph that Lieselot's room has already been prepared. Flustered, Rudolph turns on Maya, insisting that isn't the issue and demanding to know why she lied about having already notified him. Maya explains it was meant as a surprise, while Lieselot apologizes, saying she didn't mean to cause any inconvenience. Meanwhile, the third prince, Robin, dines lavishly. An attendant approaches, but Robin cuts him off, threatening to kill him if he's bothered with trivial questions again. The attendant offers a terrified apology as Robin instructs him to simply pick out clothing and gifts for a meeting with Ashila-sama the next day. As the attendant remains on the floor, Robin kicks him aside with casual cruelty. He declares that he's feeling generous and will let the interruption slide. He then props his feet on the table and asks if there's any interesting gossip about that pig Rudolph, mentioning he's heard his younger brother is looking for a fiancée. The attendant reports that Prince Rudolph is now engaged to the daughter of the Fockrance family. Robin reacts with scornful disbelief, laughing at the idea that anyone would want to marry that pig. The news finally registers, and Robin's amusement evaporates into pure fury. He leaps from his chair, enraged that Rudolph is engaged to such an important family. He roars that the filthy pig is getting far too full of himself. His rage coalesces into a venomous vow. As Rudolph stands beside a smiling Lieselot, unaware of the danger, Robin internally swears to crush him and destroy Rudolph's engagement, no matter what it takes. Prince Rudolph walks through a sunlit palace corridor, his steps faltering as he comes face to face with Lieselot. She offers him a warm, "good morning," and he stammers a greeting in return. As of the previous day, Lieselot has taken up residence in the palace, where she is scheduled to stay for an entire year. The simple morning greeting sends both of them into an internal spiral of admiration. Lieselot is captivated by the prince's silver hair in the morning sun, thinking him as perfect as a sculpture and wondering if she is the happiest girl alive. At the same time, Rudolph is struck by the contrast of her dark hair against her pale skin, considering her a work of art and questioning if he could possibly be the happiest person in the world. Their mutual, unspoken adoration is overwhelming. The intensity of the moment is too much for either of them to handle so early in the day. Later, at the breakfast table, a small detail is noted. On an otherwise clean plate, 2 pieces of carrots sit untouched. Maya, ever diligent, notices the leftover vegetables immediately, calling out the prince for leaving his carrots again. A flustered Rudolph tries to defend himself, suggesting that leaving just 1 or 2 should be acceptable. His protest is quickly overruled as Tappel intervenes, scolding him as if he were a small child. She insists he must eat properly to grow strong, prompting Rudolph to retort that he is not a child anymore. From the sidelines, the palace chef observes the scene with a smile, remarking to himself how much His Highness has mellowed. The chef continues his thoughts in a conversation with the palace manager, who agrees that the prince seems like a completely different person since the poisoning attempt. The chef adds his admiration for Maya's boldness, recalling that Prince Rudolph used to dismiss any cook who even dared to include carrots in his food. As the staff discusses the prince's past behavior, Lieselot takes a more direct approach. She lifts a piece of carrot with her fork, looking toward Rudolph and stating plainly, "You don't like carrots, Prince Rudolph?" She silently reflects that this aversion seems to have started around the time of their engagement. Her simple observation leaves him momentarily speechless. With a gentle smile, Lieselot offers to eat the remaining carrots herself, stating that she doesn't mind them and that the chef would surely prefer the food be enjoyed. While Maya begins to protest that she shouldn't spoil him, a blushing Rudolph quickly agrees to Lieselot's offer. But his agreement is not what they expect. Spurred into action by a mix of embarrassment and determination, Prince Rudolph suddenly seizes his utensils. With a fierce pout, he begins to vigorously cut and eat the carrots himself, leaving Maya and the other attendants staring in stunned silence. The prince's small victory is seen as a miracle by the staff. Mrs. Tappel warmly congratulates Lieselot, attributing Rudolph's change to her presence. Lieselot, in response, offers a small, blushing smile, basking in the quiet praise. Meanwhile, Rudolph himself is surrounded by his delighted maids. Maya expresses her confidence that with Lieselot as his fiancée, His Highness will be all right. The prince, looking pleased, soaks in the positive attention. In another part of the palace, the head chef and the palace manager discuss the recent staff changes. The manager reveals that nearly half the staff were dismissed during a downsizing, and that Maya had successfully maneuvered to remove those who bore ill will towards Rudolph. The chef clasps his hands, expressing his profound relief at not being fired. His gaze then drifts across the grand, empty dining hall, settling on Lieselot. Before she can depart, Rudolph approaches her. He asks if she is free and not too tired for a walk, as there is a place he wishes to show her. Internally ecstatic, Lieselot immediately agrees, declaring that a walk sounds lovely. As he leads her away by the hand, Rudolph quietly frets, wondering if his invitation came off as strange. Lieselot, however, is lost in a happy daze, her thoughts consumed by the fact that His Highness invited her out. They stroll through a sunlit garden, Lieselot holding a parasol to shield them. Watching from a distance, Maya recognizes the path they are taking, a hopeful expression on her face. Upon reaching their destination, Rudolph asks if she remembers it. With tears welling in her eyes, Lieselot confirms that she does. This is the very place where they first met 9 years ago, and she is moved to see it hasn't changed at all. The path before them is flanked by a line of manicured, conical trees, standing as silent witnesses to their shared past. Rudolph gently pulls her forward by the hand, his expression warm and encouraging. Lieselot looks up at him, her tears of memory now replaced by a look of pure, present happiness. He recalled the moment clearly from 9 years ago. In a field of white flowers, a much younger Rudolph knelt, offering a freshly woven flower crown to a young Lieselot. She, in turn, sat with a dark parasol, a gentle smile on her face as she held a single bloom he had given her. Their faces were close, both beaming with pure, innocent joy, the flower crown resting perfectly on her head. The memory faded as raindrops began to fall in the present. Rudolph suggested they head back, noting that Maya would have tea ready. Lieselot agreed, but then paused, realizing with an apology that she had forgotten her parasol. She insisted he go on ahead while she went to retrieve it. He watched her run off with a fond sigh. The moment of peace was shattered by the crunch of a footstep on the gravel behind him and a condescending voice. Rudolph turned to find his older half-brother, Prince Robin, sneering at him. Robin sarcastically remarked on the coincidence of finding a filthy pig in such a place. Rudolph was stunned, wondering why Robin was there, as he was supposed to be under house arrest. Robin simply confirmed it had been a while. In a flash of aggression, Robin slammed Rudolph against a stone pillar, grabbing his collar. He mocked Rudolph for getting engaged, calling him generous. Pinned and taken aback, Rudolph's mind raced, wondering if this was an act of revenge. He quickly processed the situation. He had expected one of his brothers to make a move eventually, and it seemed Robin was the first. Rudolph theorized that Robin wanted to be set up with the Fockrant's house in exchange for ceasing his hostilities. Tensely, Rudolph demanded to know what his brother was trying to say. Robin's face, cast in shadow, twisted into a wide, predatory grin. He held out his hand, his demand chilling and direct. Hand her over. Your fiancé. Rudolph stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. Ignoring Rudolph's shock, Robin continued his taunts. He questioned if Rudolph was cheating before the wedding, pointing out that he already had a fiancée. He then belittled Rudolph's lineage, stating that as a concubine's son, he had no right to act so mighty, especially since it wasn't unusual for royalty to have concubines. Leaning in close, his expression a mask of pure malice, Robin delivered his final, venomous threat. Listen well, filthy pig, he snarled. You don't get to have anything to yourself. She's mine, your fiancé included. I won't allow it. His face contorted into a wide, unhinged grin, a truly unappealing sight. Pinned beneath him, Rudolph could only stare in revulsion, realizing his brother was far worse than he had ever imagined. This vile, simple-minded man was the third prince, Robin. Finding his voice, Rudolph declared that it was enough. He understood now. This wasn't about gaining military power from House Fockrantz. It was simply because Robin couldn't stand the idea of his younger brother's status rising. Robin seemed amused by the defiance, mockingly asking if Rudolph was finally talking back. With a snarl, he announced that from this point on, it would be a little brotherly fight, and commanded Rudolph to brace himself for the blow. With a sudden, violent motion, a gloved hand shoves the hooked handle of a parasol into Prince Robin's mouth. He cries out in shock as the immense force of the blow sends him flying backward, his body airborne. Maya watches in stunned silence as Lieselot executes the attack with brutal efficiency. The force of the impact slams Robin against a heavy iron gate, which groans and bends under the pressure. Lieselot, her expression cold and unyielding, presses the parasol against his throat, choking him. Nearby, Rudolph and Maya can only stare, aghast, as Robin struggles and gasps for air. Following the assault, Robin collapses to the cobblestones. Lieselot stands over him, her parasol now closed. As he struggles to his knees, Robin sputters a threat, asking if she knows he is the third prince. Lieselot calmly feigns surprise, stating that it looked as if he simply lost his footing and fell. She then formally introduces herself as Lisbeth, eldest daughter of the Fehrenvance family and fiancée to Prince Rudolph. Her introduction finished, Lieselot's expression shifts to one of chilling intensity. She warns Robin that she holds Prince Rudolph very dear, and if any harm should befall him, she will kill him without hesitation. Her face then breaks into a bright, disarming smile as she says she looks forward to their acquaintance, leaving Robin terrified by the deadly promise. Sometime later, Rudolph and Lieselot stand together as they report finding Prince Robin unconscious, claiming it was from a fall. An attendant rushes toward them, addressing Rudolph with deference, while Robin lies motionless on the stone path behind them. The scene shifts to Rudolph's quarters, where Maya confronts both him and Lieselot. Her face is a mask of fury as she shouts, demanding to know why they left her behind during the incident. Rudolph apologizes to Maya, explaining that he wanted it to be just him and Lieselot for the day. Lieselot adds that Maya can join him next time. Internally, Rudolph reflects that he missed seeing something interesting as Lieselot's true, intense feelings are slipping out. Lieselot, meanwhile, thinks that if she had been present, she never would have allowed Robin near the prince. Inside the study, the conversation turns to politics. Rudolph explains to Lieselot and Maya that forming an alliance with Prince Robin was never an option to begin with, as it eliminates the possibility. He reveals that Robin has already aligned himself with their older brother, the first prince, Frederick. Lieselot considers this, noting that it means their only other potential ally among the princes is the second prince, Oscar. She adds, however, that the primary reason for dismissing Robin was his attempt to lay hands on her. Rudolph listens, a bead of sweat on his temple, the weight of his political predicament evident. He clenches his fist with resolve. Rudolph declares that his sights are not set on the first prince, Frederick. With a determined gaze, he announces he has another target in mind, leaving his true intentions a mystery. He reassures his companions that everything will be fine, explaining that he knows what is truly happening. Prince Robin, he clarifies, harbors a near-deranged jealousy and a profound inferiority complex toward their elder brother, Frederick. This complex is so severe that Robin requires a psychological foothold, someone he perceives as lesser, to maintain his emotional stability. Their shared mother, First Empress Alicia, was utterly devoted to the gifted elder brother, Frederick, a flawless individual superior in looks, talent, and charisma, while placing no hope in Robin. Rudolph then poses a question to the astonished Lieselot and Maya. What would happen if someone like him, the so-called filthy pig, were to join hands with brother Frederick? He predicts that Robin, upon losing the one person he always saw as inferior, would feel his already fragile pride begin to crumble. He concludes with certainty that Robin would never tolerate being beneath him and would, therefore, likely turn against brother Frederick. Maya whispers in awe at the precise psychological and political calculation. Lieselot, however, questions if things will proceed so smoothly. She asks if Frederick wouldn't find more benefit in allying with his own blood brother. Rudolph clarifies that Frederick will want to join hands with him, or more precisely, with Lord Falkrantz, who stand behind him. Lieselot presses him, asking how he can be so sure. After taking a sip from his cup and wincing at the heat, Rudolph delivers the critical piece of information. It is because brother Frederick has no military power. He elaborates on the political stalemate mentioned even in the epic. While Frederick holds overwhelming political power in the central government, Prince Oscar commands the loyalty of the border lords and military nobles, and could even surround the capital. To establish a solid foundation and counter Oscar, Frederick desperately needs the unparalleled military might of Lord Falkrantz, a stalemate that, in the original history, was only broken when Rudolph assassinated them and seized the throne. Hearing this exhaustive and prescient analysis, Lieselot is visibly moved. A faint blush appears on her cheeks as she looks at him with newfound admiration and whispers, "I'm astonished." Maya echoes the sentiment, praising his thorough analysis and keen insight, remarking that it's as if he'd seen it all firsthand. Rudolph laughs nervously, thinking to himself that he can't possibly tell them he knows the future. As his companions absorb the revelation, Rudolph calmly states his plan. He will simply wait patiently until brother Frederick inevitably reaches out to him. He thanks Lieselot for her assistance, but she, with a determined blush, asks him not to be so reckless again. She vows that she will also grow stronger. His attention then shifts to Maya, who is startled by his sudden focus. She hastily reassures him that there is no need to worry, as she has been training properly. Despite the reassurances, a sense of foreboding settles over him. He can't shake the bad feeling, hoping that nothing terrible is about to happen. That night, the palace stands silent beneath a sky full of stars. Within its walls, a long, opulent hallway is empty and still. The quiet is broken by a sudden, intense vision of eyes wide with sweat-drenched fury. The enraged eyes belong to Prince Robin, who now stalks down the same hallway, his face obscured by a hood. He stops at a door, unlocking it while seething with rage. He thinks it unforgivable that not only Rudolph, but even his fiancée, would dare to make a fool of him. Entering the darkened room, he looks toward the bed and declares that for a filthy pig, Rudolph seems to cherish her, adding that what is his is also Robin's. With a roar, he throws himself upon the sleeping Lieselot, pinning her to the bed. He snarls that he will show her who is truly superior. In a dimly lit bedroom, one of Prince Robin's henchmen looms over a sleeping Lieselot. He turns to Prince Rudolph, who stands frozen near the door, and declares that this situation is the prince's fault. His hand hovers menacingly over Lieselot's face as he internally vows to crush everything the young prince holds dear. Suddenly, Lieselot's eyes snap open with cold fury. She grabs the henchman's wrist, twisting his arm as she springs up from the bed, her expression one of pure lethality. A second henchman watches in stunned disbelief. In a blur of motion, she pivots and delivers a powerful high kick directly to the first henchman's face, sending him flying backward with a sickening crunch. She lands, her expression unchanged. A small cut on her knuckle begins to bleed, a minor injury from her powerful grip. Without pausing, she unleashes a furious barrage of punches, striking the dazed henchman's face repeatedly and with brutal efficiency. The man can only grunt as his face swells grotesquely under the relentless assault, his features becoming unrecognizable. Sometime later, Rudolph expresses his surprise that their plan concluded so smoothly. Lieselot, sitting calmly with Maya nearby, reassures him, stating that she told him it would be fine. In the background, the two henchmen are bound and kneeling, utterly defeated. He points to the captives and asks who they are. Maya explains that they are bad people who were found guarding the front of the palace and were captured earlier. The terrified men can only stammer pleas for forgiveness. Rudolph identifies them as the ones who were snooping around, and Maya confirms that they were saved because she noticed them. Lieselot smiles and adds a correction, stating that it wasn't difficult at all because the entire operation succeeded thanks to the prince's own precise instructions. His plan having come to fruition, the narrative shifts to 9 days earlier. Inside his office, Rudolph notes the presence of infiltrators in the palace. Beside him, Lieselot offers a direct solution: extermination. He dismisses her offer, explaining that they will instead create an opening for the spies to act, which will in turn reveal Prince Robin's true objective. He tasks Maya with investigating them. The memory then flashes forward to the captured henchmen, as Rudolph recalls his fury upon learning their goal was the master key to Lieselot's chambers. Back in the present, one of the bound and gagged henchmen struggles against his restraints, shouting at Rudolph and demanding to know if he thinks he can get away with this. Rudolph simply observes the man's futile outburst. The man's muffled shouts continue, revealing that he and his accomplice had opposed this course of action from the very beginning, having warned their master not to antagonize Prince Rudolph. The other henchman begins to shout his own defense, claiming he was told the key was only to startle the prince, not for an assault. He then foolishly declares that Lieselot would be better off with him, earning a cold, silent glare from the woman in question as his partner threatens to kill him for his insolence. Her expression darkens. Lieselot offers to assist the man, her voice dripping with menace as she suggests ensuring he can never produce an heir. A horrified Maya begs her to stop, despite internally agreeing with the sentiment. Rudolph calmly cuts through the tension. He states there is no need for such a dangerous risk and proposes a simpler, more official solution: hand the culprits over to the emperor. His decision carries immense weight. For attempting to assault his younger brother's fiancée, the henchman will face severe consequences far beyond a simple suspension. The likely outcome is the annulment of his own engagement, years of confinement, or even banishment from the imperial family, a scandal of the highest order. Lieselot seems concerned, asking if he is truly all right with just letting the man go. Rudolph reassures her that as long as the man is out of his sight and she is unharmed, it is enough. He does, however, admit that certain details of the situation are slightly troubling. He looks upon the captured retainers of Prince Robin. He concludes that although they were coerced into their actions, the official punishment they are about to receive will be far harsher than any repercussions their master will face. His thoughts were shattered as Maya burst into the room, crying out that something terrible had happened. Prince Rudolph looked up, startled, as she explained that the punishment for the recent transgressions could, in some cases, be death. The commotion drew an unexpected visitor. A regal woman, identified as the first empress of the Baldike Empire, Alicia, made her entrance. Both Rudolph and Maya stared in shock, recognizing her as the mother of Princes Robin and Frederick. The empress greeted Rudolph coolly, remarking that it had been some time. He quickly composed himself and asked what brought Empress Alicia to his palace. Internally, he surmised that her spies must have informed her, but he was stunned at how quickly she had acted. The empress, with a knowing smile, claimed she had merely heard a commotion and grew curious. Her tone sharpened as she leaned in, demanding to know if he was listening and calling him a piglet. She pressed her advantage, reminding him that depending on his answer, the matter could easily escalate and damage his credibility. Rudolph stood for a moment, processing the situation. He understood now. She knew Robin was here and had made the first move. He had no choice but to address the truth of the matter. The empress preempted his explanation, stating that a rat seemed to have infiltrated the palace last night. Seeing his chance to seize the upper hand, Rudolph played along, confirming they had caught the troublesome intruder. With the stage set, the empress asked him to hand the rat over to her. He processed her words, a slight smile on his face. This was troubling, but not insurmountable. He realized her goal was simply to rescue Robin. He mused internally that he was just thinking of keeping a new pet in the Cancer Palace. The Empress offered to personally take the rat into her care. Rudolph countered, framing the situation as his own failure of management as the palace administrator. He argued that if he simply let the rat go, he would be unable to explain himself to the emperor. The Empress smoothly dismissed his concern, suggesting that His Majesty would surely understand. He saw through a shameless ploy. If he handed Robin over so easily, the entire incident would be swept under the rug, and the fate of his retainers would be left uncertain. He resolved to do something else instead. He faced the Empress and declared that he had 3 requests to make of her. Standing in the grand hallway, with Lieselot and Maya behind him, he promised that if she would hear them, he would hand over the rat responsible for the incident. The Empress scoffed at the notion of 3 requests, deeming it greedy. Beside Rudolph, Lieselot and Maya were stunned, realizing with shock that he was using the captured Prince Robin as a bargaining chip. He met her gaze without flinching, insisting that this was not a risk on her part. On the contrary, he explained, he was the one taking a risk by acceding to her wishes, and that his proposal should be seen as generous. After a moment of silent consideration from her position on the balcony, the Empress relented. She agreed to hear his requests. Rudolph watched her, his expression firm and unwavering. He then stated his terms. The first request was for the rat, Prince Robin, to be kept outside the Scorpio Palace, so he could no longer cause trouble there. The second, directed at Empress Alicia herself, was to treat the entire incident as if it never happened. This second condition elicited a visible shock from the Empress and her attendant. He elaborated on his second point, clarifying that the people from the Taurus Palace who were present, Robin's captured retainers, were also to be treated as though nothing had transpired. He explained his reasoning. To have people executed simply for serving Robin would be a dreadful outcome. The Empress smiled faintly, finding his second request acceptable and unexpectedly clever. Rudolph thanked her. She then prompted him for his last request, hoping it would be of mutual benefit like the first 2. She mused that his plan was also a gain for her, as it would prevent unnecessary discord with the rest of Robin's retainers. His demeanor shifted as he prepared to state his final condition. He began by reminding the Empress of his own precarious standing, acknowledging that, as she was aware, he felt a little out of place in the palace. He continued, stating that it is only natural for someone like him to be despised and unwelcome. He revealed the source of this sentiment. His mother was merely the emperor's concubine, yet she had dared to demand inheritance rights for her illegitimate child, as if asking for a jewel. A brief memory surfaced of his mother pleading with the emperor. Empress Alicia cuts through the pleasantries, demanding to know what Prince Rudolph is truly trying to say. Foregoing his roundabout approach, he prepares to state his intentions plainly. He explains that, up until recently, his only wish was to live a quiet life, far from the burdens of the throne. He turns to Lieselot, assuring her that he understands his place and has no grand ambitions. However, he continues, his engagement to Lieselot has inevitably gained him the support of Marquis Falkrantz. He now sees this as an opportunity to mend ties with his estranged brother, Frederick, and strengthen their bond, revealing this to be his third request. His goal is clear, to form an alliance with Frederick, with Empress Alicia serving as the mediator between them. The Empress considers this, musing to herself that she came to deal with a rat, but is instead receiving such a proposal from Rudolph. A small, amused smile plays on her lips. With regal confidence, she declares that she will accept all of his requests. She adds that Frederick will be delighted, claiming he has always been concerned for Rudolph. The prince offers his thanks, though he internally scoffs, doubting the cold-blooded Frederick could feel any genuine kindness. As he prepares to take his leave, the Empress stops him to ask one more thing. She then requests that he entrust the matter of the rat entirely to her, Empress Alicia. Her line of questioning then takes a sharp, personal turn as she asks him about his mother. Rudolph, taken aback, states that he thinks nothing of her. She is herself, and he is himself. The Empress simply watches him with a knowing expression and acknowledges his answer. The moment they are away from the Empress, Lieselot's composure shatters. She whirls on Rudolph, her voice trembling with rage as she accuses him of scheming. She cries out in anguish, "And mother, I would never!" Her outburst leaves both Rudolph and Maya utterly stunned. Her fury hangs in the air as the 3 walk down the long corridor. Rudolph glances back, his face a mask of shock and confusion, while Lieselot and Maya follow with expressions of distress and surprise. Elsewhere, under a stone colonnade on the palace grounds, a secret battle rages. One of Prince Robin's henchmen clashes blades with an unseen opponent, the sharp sounds of their duel echoing through the manicure gardens. The swordsman strained to hold his position, wooden sword locked against his instructors. Marquis Douglas commented on the recent misfortune the prince had suffered, and Rudolph could only manage a strained affirmation. As they remained locked, the Marquis pressed further, asking about Empress Alicia. Rudolph explained that she had already dispatched his brother, Robin, to the academy dormitory. From the Marquis's point of view, this was far too lenient. With a sudden, powerful swing, he shattered Rudolph's practice sword, the impact shocking the young prince. His lesson delivered, the Marquis lowered his weapon and concluded the day's training. Sprawled on the ground and catching his breath, Rudolph wearily agreed. This training was of utmost importance to Rudolph. He was determined to become strong enough to protect Lieselot himself. Since her arrival, her father, Marquis Quirce, had been personally teaching him swordsmanship, a heaven-sent opportunity he could not waste. Later, while sitting with the Marquis, Rudolph earnestly addressed him as father, expressing his desire to grow stronger. He confessed to feeling guilty for taking up the Marquis's valuable time, given his own weakness. In another part of the estate, Lieselot's maid, Maya, voiced her agreement with her mistress's assessment of the recent events. She reasoned that had they surrendered Prince Robin without any conditions, their position would have been scorned, and conflict with Empress Alicia would have been certain. Lieselot, still visibly distressed, reiterated to Rudolph that with the Empress's personal involvement, they had no choice but to hand Robin over, doubting they could have secured a better outcome. Rudolph gently tried to calm her, assuring her that he understood. Watching his daughter, the Marquis calmly asked if she had assumed he was angry. He clarified that the opposite was true. Having noticed how passionately Rudolph applied himself to his sword lessons, he did not mind the prince using his name as leverage in negotiations. He then turned his full attention to the prince, a broad, booming laugh erupting from him. He declared that he was, in fact, overjoyed to see how quickly his highness was improving. Rudolph stared in disbelief, unable to process the Marquis's genuine delight. He sat across from Marquis Douglas, who directly addressed the matter of the throne. The Marquis stated he had heard that, despite holding the right of succession, Rudolph had no interest in it. With a bead of sweat on his brow, the prince quietly confirmed this was true. Continuing, he clarified that he had no desire for the throne, or rather, no interest in the imperial family at all. The Marquis and Lieselot listened intently. Internally, he asked for forgiveness, believing his only worth was his imperial bloodline and that he could not possibly meet the Marquis's expectations. He felt he had nothing more to offer. To his surprise, the Marquis let out a soft chuckle, remarking that this was all the better. He then leaned forward, adding that there was something the prince might not know. The Marquis explained that, aside from Lieselot, the Quirce house has no heir. They had been considering adopting from a branch family, but that changed when she became engaged to Rudolph. He concluded the explanation by asking if the prince was willing. He then posed a stunning question. Would Rudolph be willing to join the Quirce family as an adopted son-in-law? The implication struck Rudolph with the force of a physical blow. If he married into the Marquis's household, he would be freed from his imperial status. His hopeful silence was broken by the Marquis's booming laughter. Flustered, Rudolph stammered, asking if it was truly all right for someone like him, a weak man with nothing to offer. The Marquis leaned on the table, demanding to know what he was saying. Dismissing this self-deprecation, the Marquis praised him, noting that while his training had just begun, his judgment and adaptability were remarkable. He confidently predicted that with continued discipline, Rudolph would surpass swordsmen of his age in just half a year. The prince could only blush at the flattery. Lieselot chimed in, agreeing that her father was right. With an intense, unwavering gaze, the Marquis declared that he speaks only the truth when it comes to martial skill. As Prince Rudolph processes the Marquis's offer, Lieselot adds her own heartfelt praise. She commends Rudolph's gentle heart, noting his mercy towards even an enemy's servants, and calls his handling of a negotiation with Empress Alicia splendid. With a confident smile, she declares her certainty that, in time, he will even surpass the legendary Wilhelm as a swordsman. The Marquis reinforces the sentiment, stating firmly that neither his daughter nor his retainer believe Rudolph has no value. Overwhelmed by this unexpected wave of acceptance, tears well up in Rudolph's eyes. He struggles to voice his gratitude, managing only a choked, "Thank you." A single tear escapes and falls. Lieselot's expression softens with profound emotion as she looks at him. She pleads with his highness not to think of himself as worthless, confessing that to her, he is utterly irreplaceable. The tear traces a path down his cheek as he remains completely overcome, his lips trembling with the force of his feelings. In this moment of profound emotional release, a single, powerful thought crystallizes in his mind. He has found a true family. He envisions himself smiling, with a proud Marquis Douglas and a gentle Lieselot at his side. The scene abruptly shifts to the dark and imposing Sauvalier Manor under the light of a full moon. From a long, shadowed hallway within, the sound of heartbroken, sobbing echoes. Inside, a man weeps over a coffin, crying out for someone named Patrick. Behind him, a young man with dark hair watches with cold contempt. This young man seethes internally, recalling how this father doted on his twin brother, Patrick, but cast him aside for being born with red hair. His resentment is so great that he wishes the hero Wilhelm had died instead of his brother. His dark thoughts manifest in a horrific act. An axe swings down, embedding itself in the back of the grieving father's head with a sickening crunch. Blood sprays as the man's face contorts in a final moment of agony and shock. He stands triumphant over the carnage, a book resting on a nearby table, and lets out a maniacal laugh. He declares that he will succeed without fail and become a hero whose name is etched into history, boasting that he possesses knowledge of a history that no one else knows. 3 months after the negotiation with Empress Alicia, Prince Rudolph's training continues. He spars intensely with Lieselot, their wooden staves clashing. Exhausted and breathing heavily, he sits on the ground as Lieselot observes that he has grown stronger. Rudolph credits his improvement to her and his father. As they rest, Maya approaches, announcing that a letter has arrived for His Highness. Rudolph looks up in surprise as she presents a sealed envelope, clarifying that it is from Empress Alicia. He takes the letter. Lieselot asks what Empress Alicia has to say, correctly guessing it concerns forming friendly terms with Prince Frederick. Rudolph reads the contents and confirms her suspicion, announcing that the Imperial New Year's celebration will be hosted this week in the palace. He realizes this means he will finally meet his older brother. The grand event is to be held at the Zodiac Palace, an imposing and elegant structure standing against the night sky under a crescent moon. Inside, the vast, arched hall of the palace is already teeming with the Empire's nobility, gathered in their finest attire for the prestigious celebration. The crowd murmurs with anticipation, their collective gaze fixed forward as the main event is about to begin. From a high balcony, the Emperor of the Baldike Empire, Karl I Baldike, addresses his subjects. He thanks them for gathering and raises his glass to celebrate the new year. He then commands their attention, announcing his intention to introduce his beloved family, prompting a wave of applause from below. Following the Emperor's announcement, the first Empress, Alicia, and the second Empress, Katerina, make their entrance. Alicia carries herself with regal composure, while Katerina offers a faint, demure smile as they descend the stairs. Their procession is suddenly interrupted by the flamboyant arrival of the beloved concubine, Beatrice. She loudly apologizes for being late, lamenting that she couldn't get her makeup right. Her dramatic entrance causes a stir among the nobles, who whisper about her vulgarity and how she tarnishes the dignity of the royal family. Watching the scene unfold from the crowd, the first prince, Frederick, stands with an air of detached confidence, while the second prince, Oscar, observes with a sharp, calculating glare. He remains cool and charming, the top of his class at the Imperial Academy. The assembled nobles murmur about the first prince, Frederick. Nearby, they also observe the second prince, Oscar, noting that while he appears harmless, his swordsmanship surpasses even Frederick's. Their gossip also touches upon the absence of the third prince, Robin, a known good-for-nothing whose recent troublemaking led to a cancelled engagement, a difficult situation for his mother, Empress Alicia. As the whispers fill the hall, Prince Rudolph makes his entrance with Lieselot on his arm. The crowd's attention shifts, with many noting that the rumors of his engagement to the Fockrant's daughter were true. They also remark on how he seems to have become a person of real character since the assassination attempt. One noble, however, looks on with contempt. He finds it disgraceful that the son of a prostitute is now gaining power within the royal family, wondering what he might do with it. Others speculate on a different rumor, that Rudolph might be adopted into the Fockrant's family. Should that happen, he would lose any claim to the throne, a development they believe would preserve the dignity of the imperial line. The court now sees Rudolph as the fulcrum upon which the succession rests. His allegiance, whether to Prince Frederick's faction or Prince Oscar's, will inevitably shift the balance of power among the heirs to the throne. His maid, Maya, quietly confirms that the rumors are spreading just as he intended, though she finds their content distasteful. Rudolph is pleased. His goal is to make the court pay as much attention to his movements as possible. From a distance, the concubine Beatrice watches with a scornful expression. He feels it. With all eyes now on him, something is bound to happen at any second. His gaze meets the intense, silent glare of Beatrice. But the first to approach is not Beatrice, but his half-brother, Prince Oscar. He offers congratulations on the engagement. Lieselot, ever composed, thanks him and introduces herself as Rudolph's fiancée. Holding a glass of wine, Oscar invites Rudolph to speak privately, remarking that he is now old enough to drink. He flashes a polite smile and apologizes to his brother, claiming a prior engagement. At that moment, Empress Alicia appears, stating that Prince Frederick is waiting. She instructs Rudolph to follow her, effectively ending his conversation with Oscar. Rudolph offers a final apology to the second prince as he is led away. As he is led away, the young prince internally reflects on the confrontation. With a smirk, he silently thanks his brother Oscar for the perfect assist, confirming the public rejection was a calculated part of his own plan. This public maneuver sends ripples through the court. Rudolph considers it a shocking event that his brother, Frederick, would reach out to him first, someone who had always been ignored. By refusing Oscar to meet with Frederick, he has broadcast a clear message to the gossiping nobles. Prince Rudolph has joined the Frederick faction. He strides forward, believing that once this news spreads among the nobility, his tarnished reputation might finally improve. In his mind, this is another step closer to securing a peaceful life. Lieselot, walking beside him, quietly asks about his feelings. He starts to apologize for refusing Oscar, but then clarifies that it was a purely political decision on his brother's part. Therefore, he explains, he has no reason to feel guilty for his own calculated response. Meanwhile, observing from a balcony above, Prince Oscar holds a glass of wine. He remains outwardly composed as he watches the scene unfold below. His mother, second Empress Katerina, joins him, remarking that he was turned down. Oscar dismisses any notion of pessimism, stating that it is best to think of Rudolph as a different person now. He notes that the old Rudolph would have been incapable of such a political response, and this change, he admits, only makes him want his younger brother on his side even more. His calm facade then shatters, his expression twisting into one of chilling ambition. He reveals his true, terrifying goal. For his own path of conquest, he will use Rudolph to annihilate the royal family with amber eyes. At a grand dining table, Prince Rudolph sits with his fiancée, Lieselotte. They are joined by the second prince, Oscar, and the first empress, Alicia, the tense silence of the formal gathering hanging heavy in the air. His attention, however, is fixed on the first prince, Frederick. Rudolph reflects that even in the historical epic of Wilhelm, there is little information about Frederick. The only memory he possesses from his previous life is a grim one. Frederick is assassinated early on by Rudolph himself, in his future guise as a tyrant. The thought broadens, and he considers Lieselotte and Oscar seated nearby. As Rudolph mulls this over, Prince Oscar breaks the silence, addressing Frederick directly. He asks if this is the first time the two half-brothers have actually spoken face-to-face. Without a moment's hesitation, Frederick confirms that it is. He then clarifies his statement, adding that while this may be their first conversation, they have indeed met once before. Frederick's words trigger a distant memory within Rudolph, transporting him back to his childhood, where he sees himself as a small boy, lost in the pages of a book. The memory sharpens. It was a tea party hosted by Empress Alicia. While the adults conversed, the children who had been brought along were left to play in the garden. In that garden, a young boy cruelly rode upon a young girl's back, whipping her on and demanding she run faster, treating her as his personal steed. From a nearby table, a young Prince Frederick watched the bullying unfold. The boy taunted the crying girl, calling her a fat pig. Frederick, stone-faced, silently told himself not to look at them. It was then that a young Rudolph stepped in, confronting the bullies and declaring that they would have to go through him to get to Prince Frederick. This drew the attention of other children, who immediately began fawning over Frederick, offering to become his attendant or even his consort. The young prince, however, was unimpressed, internally questioning what he could possibly gain from having such people around him, viewing them as insignificant compared to a brother like himself who was needed by so many. But the girl he had defended, a young Lieselotte, looked at him with fierce, tear-streaked determination. She vowed then and there that she would prove useful as his right hand, that she would protect him, and that she would one day become a beautiful wife to soothe him. The memory of that day continues to unfold in Rudolph's mind. He sees his younger self, book in hand, coldly informing the other children that forming a friendship with him offers no gain. Declaring them a disturbance to his reading, he decides to excuse himself, leaving the others in stunned silence. His cold dismissal was met with a violent shove that sent him to the ground. From his present-day perspective, Rudolph reflects on this past powerlessness, wondering how his brother Frederick can so easily attain and discard things that he, as a child, could never even dream of possessing. This memory solidifies his long-held perception of his elder brother. This is the first Prince Frederick, a cold, merciless rationalist who never does anything unless it benefits him. He tells himself that he is different now, but a bitter realization follows. The fact that Frederick didn't even recognize him from their brief childhood encounter means that, to the first prince, he wasn't even worth speaking to in the first place. This internal reflection gives way to his present-day declaration at the dinner table. With Lieselotte at his side, Rudolph addresses Frederick directly, announcing that he now possesses the military strength his brother lacks. He confirms that he has the Fockrantz family's full support and intends to use it to back Frederick's faction. His words cause a stir among the other nobles of the table. The implication is clear and shocking. Prince Frederick has accepted Prince Rudolph into his faction, a move that will change the balance of power entirely. This carefully orchestrated move was not spontaneous. Rudolph recalls a prior conversation with Empress Katerina, who coached him on how to engage Frederick. She suggested he ask about the Imperial Academy, mentioning Frederick's time as student council president as a way to conduct even meaningless small talk. Rudolph had agreed, stating his respect for his elder brother as a model for students. However, the conversation did not unfold as planned. After Rudolph's grand declaration, Frederick stands abruptly. He excuses himself, stating he has appointments with other nobility, leaving a stunned Rudolph and Lieselotte in his wake. As his brother walks away, Rudolph realizes his own naivete. He had overestimated himself. His shock curdles into a grim understanding. He realizes that to Frederick, he personally holds no value. The ritual of friendship was merely a transaction to secure the Fockrantz family. With that alliance complete, there is no longer any reason for Frederick to speak with him. The true value, he understands, lies with the family behind him. A bitter, quiet laugh escapes his lips. He looks down, his face obscured by shadow, and questions his own reaction. Why am I shocked? He thinks, confronting an uncomfortable truth. Did he genuinely believe he could achieve his own revenge by simply borrowing the authority of another? He stood there, a faint smile on his face, wondering if he had naively expected a pleasant chat with Frederick simply because of his new backing. As he pondered this, Lieselotte gently took his hand, her touch a grounding presence. She looked up at him with a warm, reassuring smile, and affirmed that he could rest assured, for she was there with him. Her simple gesture broke through his thoughts, and he turned to her, managing a genuine smile of his own. He thanked her for her support. Just then, a woman approached, apologizing for Frederick's behavior. It was the first Empress, Alicia. She dismissed Rudolph's brother as a busy man and the entire meeting as nothing more than a family charade, a ritual to display for the other nobles. Rudolph processed her words, the truth of them settling in. Now that the purpose of the public alliance had been fulfilled, there was nothing else for Frederick to concern himself with. As the realization dawned, Empress Alicia called out to him again, remarking that she had almost forgotten to tell him something important. She declared that she felt the return he received from his brother was far too little. Stating that she, the first Empress, also possessed considerable power, she offered her assistance. With a confident laugh, she announced that from now on, they were allies. Rudolph could only stare, stunned into silence. Finding his voice, he hesitantly accepted her offer. Internally, he marveled at the turn of events, having always thought the first Empress was a much stricter and more aloof figure. Suddenly, the sharp sound of shattering glass cut through the murmur of the party, startling Rudolph and drawing his attention. He turned to see the source, a woman, Beatrice, swaying unsteadily as she was chided by her companion for drinking too much. She loudly addressed Rudolph, noting his unusually long stay at the party. Frozen in place, Rudolph could only utter a single, horrified word. Mother! He was powerless to stop her. As Beatrice's attendant yelled for her to be quiet, she struck him across the face. Ignoring the man, she dismissed Empress Alicia as an ugly woman and began to pull Rudolph away from the stunned crowd. Her face loomed with a menacing intensity as she proposed a private family chat. Her voice dripped with false sweetness as she asked, "What do you say, Rudolph?" In a grand, ornate hall, Prince Rudolph is approached by his mother, Beatrice. She suggests they have a private family chat, but Rudolph eyes her with suspicion, questioning her sudden desire to talk. He coolly reminds her that she is usually attending to the Emperor's official duties at this time, and insists he has nothing to discuss. Beatrice simply smiles, replying that something else is more important. Before he can respond, she suddenly pulls him into a tight embrace. An attendant standing nearby gasps, completely stunned by the unexpected display of affection. Rudolph shoves her away, flustered and demanding to know what she is doing. The thought flashes through his mind that she has never once held him, not even when he was little. Beatrice, however, merely asks if he is going through a rebellious phase. Her tone then shifts to one of somber apology. She explains that she, too, was desperate, born to a noble line that possessed nothing but a title. Her parents lost everything, and she drifted through menial jobs in a life she describes as hell, leading her to neglect him. She continues, stating this desperation was exactly why she clung to the imperial house. She was not from a lineage fit to be an official wife, but after being hired as a servant, she caught the emperor's eye. Before long, she conceived Rudolph. Beatrice's voice rises with passion as she declares that her fear was not for herself, but for him. She was terrified of being cast aside by his majesty, and even more terrified that Rudolph would be left with nowhere to belong. This possibility, she claims, was her greatest fear. Rudolph is left stunned and wide-eyed. His shock hardens into a cold glare. Looking directly at his emotional mother, he states with chilling finality, "That's a lie." He presses his point, questioning how her words could be true. He reminds her that she always prioritized entertaining the emperor and treated him as a nuisance whenever he asked for help. Rudolph's voice is laced with old pain as he recalls asking her why she gave birth to him. Her answer then was blunt. It was so she could stay in the imperial family. He asks how he can possibly believe her current words were for his sake, leaving Beatrice utterly speechless. He stands resolute against his mother's emotional appeal, declaring simply, "I am myself." Beatrice lets out an exasperated sigh, calling him an insolent brat and questioning his parentage. She dismisses his stance as a little performance, demanding to know its purpose. Her focus then shifts to the matter of his engagement, dismissing the talk of him becoming an adopted son-in-law to Lieselot's family as some kind of mistake. She urges him to think very carefully, reminding him of his supposed debt to the imperial family. She spells out the consequences. Marrying into Lieselot's family means forfeiting his title as a prince. The threat leaves Rudolph stunned. His mother's previous claims of suffering because of her position now clash with her demands of loyalty. He internally questions the very premise. What could he possibly owe the imperial family? His shock gives way to a cold, clear understanding. He tells himself to calm down, realizing that this woman, who clings so desperately to the imperial family, is motivated only by self-preservation. To her, nothing matters more than him remaining in the royal lineage to protect her own status. With this clarity, he understands that he has, without even realizing it, chosen the best possible path. The absurdity of the situation strikes him, and he erupts into loud, unrestrained laughter, leaving his mother bewildered. His laughter infuriates Beatrice. "What are you smiling about?" she demands, her earlier feigned pleasantries vanishing as she angrily wipes a drink from a nearby table. Before Rudolph can answer, Lieselot steps forward, her presence commanding. She introduces herself as the eldest daughter of House Quirce and pointedly asks Beatrice what she thinks she is doing to her future husband. With a sharp smile, she dismisses the title of mother-in-law, viciously dressing down Beatrice for her lack of courtesy and poor upbringing, declaring it an insult to House Quirce. An intense, silent confrontation erupts between the two women, a palpable tension filling the space between them. Rudolph moves to Lieselot's side, placing a hand on her shoulder. He calmly informs his mother that he owes her no explanation and has never once considered revenge. His only desire, he states plainly, is to be with the woman he loves. Lieselot affirms his words with a simple, "That's right." He watched as his mother, Beatrice, turned to leave, taunting that she felt a small sense of satisfaction. As she began to walk away, a furious voice suddenly roared, "Don't you dare!" The shout culminated in a shocking act of violence. A glass decanter shattered against the back of Beatrice's head, spraying shards and liquid everywhere. Rudolph and Lieselot could only stare, their faces frozen in disbelief. The assailant was revealed to be Empress Alicia, who now had a bleeding gash on her own forehead from the force of the impact. Rudolph was stunned, wondering why she had defended him. Across the hall, Beatrice, blood dripping down her face, glared with pure hatred at the Empress's cold expression. Ignoring her own injury, Empress Alicia fixed Beatrice with a commanding gaze. She declared that Beatrice never fails to disgrace the imperial house, noting that she always causes trouble whenever the emperor is away. She then ordered Beatrice to return to her chambers. Though seething with rage, Beatrice submitted to the empress's authority. With a final, venomous look toward Alicia, Rudolph, and Lieselot, she conceded, "As you wish," and made her retreat. Having dealt with the disruption, Empress Alicia turned to the stunned guests. With a slight bow and unwavering composure, she apologized for the disturbance and instructed everyone to continue with the grand New Year's celebration. In the ensuing quiet, Rudolph asked Lieselot what his mother had said, but Lieselot dismissed it as insignificant. Rudolph's attention then shifted to the Empress, noticing she was bleeding. Alicia waved off his concern, claiming it was nothing, while internally vowing to never approve of his marriage and to ensure it was squashed. Empress Katerina approached Alicia, gently noting that her wound was not nothing. With a small smile, she added a wry observation that young people tend to exaggerate. Katerina's words seemed to draw Alicia's attention back to the prince. Her eyes widened as she spotted a cut on Rudolph's forehead. She cried out his name, realizing with alarm that he too had been injured by the flying glass shards. Her concern mounting, Empress Alicia declared that it would be terrible if his wound became infected. She immediately pointed to a nearby attendant and issued a sharp command. "You there, take him to the infirmary. He is made to sit," as Empress Alicia tensed his head wound. She apologizes for the earlier commotion, firmly telling him to hold still as she wraps a bandage around his forehead. With the dressing in place, she declares it should suffice for the time being, as Lieselot looks on. Following her ministration, the Empress addresses the prince, who now sits beside Lieselot on a divan. She cautions him that the wound may swell later and advises him to be careful. He looks up at the Empress, his voice filled with genuine confusion. He asks her directly why she would go to such lengths to defend someone like him. The Empress's face darkens, her previously composed expression twisting into one of cold fury. Her voice drops as she gives a reason, a chilling confession. She detests that woman, Beatrice. The revelation hangs in the air, stunning both Rudolph and Lieselot. Empress Alicia confesses her perspective, explaining that from the day she became the first empress, the nation and the imperial palace have been everything to her. Even without the emperor's affection, she has devoted her life to the empire. She states she had no objection to him taking Lady Katerina as the second empress, understanding his duty to produce capable heirs. Her composure shatters, however, as she recalls the memory of Beatrice. Her face contorts with rage as she remembers how that woman barged into the palace, trampling all over it with filthy feet and laughing as if she owned the very place Alicia held sacred. Looking at Prince Rudolph, she confesses that because of this deep-seated hatred for Beatrice, she ended up neglecting him. She reaffirms her identity as the first empress of the Baldyke Empire, declaring that what Beatrice defiled was the imperial palace itself, a place she has loved as if it were her own child. Her gaze softens as she explains that in the moment of the attack, her body moved on its own. She tells a stunned Rudolph that as a member of the imperial family, he too is her beloved child, and any injury gained while protecting him is neither painful nor frightening. She acknowledges that this sudden change of heart must seem far too late for him. With self-reproach, she wonders how she could have forgotten something so simple, concluding that there must be something deeply wrong with her. The Empress reflects that if only Rudolph had remained motivated by self-interest alone, then she would not have to feel this complex guilt and newfound affection. Overwhelmed by her words, Rudolph begins to cry. He realizes he can feel a warmth from the Empress that he never once received from his real mother. Through his tears, he manages to thank her. Seeing the two together, Empress Alicia apologizes for having tied them to a troublesome old woman like herself. With a gentle push and a knowing smile from behind a corner, she urges the young couple to go and enjoy the party. The festivities continue in the Grand Hall. Couples glide across the dance floor while an all-female quintet, with Lieselot playing the violin, provides elegant music for the guests. As the night draws to a close, a carriage carrying Prince Rudolph and Lieselot departs from the manor, traveling down a hill under a sky filled with stars. He agrees with Lieselot as they travel, remarking that it was indeed surprising to see such an emotional side of Empress Alicia. Lieselot expresses her relief, noting that it seems the Empress will help mediate matters for them in the future. However, she trails off with hesitation, prompting Rudolph to ask what is on her mind. She reveals that one thing still concerns her: his mother, Beatrice. As Rudolph reacts with surprise, Lieselot adds that there is no need for him to address the woman with honorifics. He dismisses the concern, bluntly calling his mother a terrible woman. Lieselot agrees, pointing out that Beatrice behaved arrogantly even as she was leaving. His confusion is evident as he asks what she means. Lieselot explains that it seemed to her that Beatrice was acting that way intentionally, urging the prince to think about it. She begins her analysis by stating that to remain in the imperial palace, a person requires two things: a secure position, such as his as the fourth prince, and the affection of the emperor. She clarifies that Empress Alicia's actions earlier were a move to secure the former, his position. Rudolph quietly confirms that he understands this part of the political maneuvering. He remains perplexed, however, stating that his mother's behavior makes no sense if she truly cared about her place in the palace. Lieselot confirms that his assessment is correct. She then poses a critical question: why would someone obsessed with staying in the palace risk being cast aside? Lieselot theorizes that such outrageous antics would eventually exhaust even the emperor's tolerance. Her analysis reaches a startling conclusion: Beatrice's actions contradict her supposed intentions. It almost seems, Lieselot suggests, as if she wished to be discarded by the emperor. The implication leaves Rudolph wide-eyed with shock. He remains stunned by the revelation about his mother, but Lieselot calmly explains her perspective. She tells him the reason his mother's behavior seems strange to him is simply because he is a sensible and level-headed person, unlike a fool who would act against reason. She continues, laying out a simple fact: once she marries into his family, his mother will no longer be permitted to reside in the palace. Therefore, she concludes, his mother's schemes are ultimately irrelevant to them. Rudolph sputters in disbelief, pointing out that she is already discussing such distant plans when he is not even enrolled in the academy yet. Lieselot dismisses his concern, insisting that the time is not distant at all and will pass in the blink of an eye. She declares that they will hold their wedding ceremony immediately after his graduation. As their carriage travels under a starry night sky, Lieselot excitedly continues planning their grand celebration. She mentions asking Maya to take his measurements, as neither her dress nor his tuxedo have been tailored. Rudolph, still overwhelmed, protests that she's getting ahead of herself and that his school uniform should be the immediate priority. Meanwhile, in a lavish room elsewhere, the second prince, Oscar, receives a report. He processes the information that Rudolph has sided with the first prince, Frederick's, faction and is planning to enroll in the Imperial Academy. Having absorbed this new political development, he leans back thoughtfully. With a determined expression, Oscar concludes that it is now time for him to begin making his own moves. He turns his attention to a terrified maid standing before him, dismissing her with a curt, "Good work. You may leave." The maid, trembling and sweating, stammers an apology as she backs away. As she retreats, Oscar stops her, remarking that he nearly forgot something. The maid freezes, her body shaking violently as she realizes the effects of a previous dose are wearing off. She whispers the name Wilhelm Sama, in a panic as Oscar produces a small vial. He seizes the maid's chin, forcing her mouth open to administer another drop. "What am I to you?" he demands. Instantly, her terror is replaced by ecstatic devotion. She declares that he is her very purpose for living, that dying for him is her greatest joy, and thanks Wilhelm Sama profusely. Satisfied, Oscar smiles just as a knock sounds at the door. The door opens to reveal the head butler, who excuses himself for the interruption. He glances at the scene, Oscar standing over the kneeling, devoted maid, and apologizes for disturbing the prince while he was enjoying himself. Oscar, his expression hardening slightly at the intrusion, states that it is fine and asks if there was any trouble at the celebration. He listened as the head butler delivered his report, confirming that no one suspects that the man known as Yolan is dead. When asked if there were any issues, the butler's response was a simple, definitive none. A wide, cruel grin spread across Prince Oscar's face. He commanded the butler, whom he called Claude, to continue serving as the deceased's double. Bowing, Claude affirmed his obedience, stating, "As you command, my lord." With the matter settled, he turned and walked towards the balcony doors, his long coat billowing behind him. He noted to himself that he must return to the academy the following day. Stepping out into the night, he gazed over the sprawling city under the full moon, the small vial of liquid still clutched in his hand. A dark, twisted smile formed on his lips as his true objective echoed in his mind: to destroy this nation. Inside a carriage, Lieselot expresses her dismay, crying out that she doesn't want to be separated from Prince Rudolph. He reminds her that the dorms at the academy are segregated for boys and girls, and there's no helping it. Their maid, Maya, seizes the opportunity to tease them, pointing out that Lieselot reverted to calling him Prince despite their agreement to use nicknames. Lieselot protests, but Maya playfully insists they call each other by their affectionate nicknames. Her teasing hits its mark. Both Rudolph and Lieselot blush intensely, flustered. He shyly stammers Liz, while she internally thanks Rudy-sama. Watching their reaction, Maya is overcome with delight, thinking to herself how incredibly cute the two of them are. This exchange is a continuation of a promise made 3 months ago when they were having their new Imperial Academy uniforms made. Rudolph had proposed that once they became classmates, they should use nicknames. Now, as their carriage proceeds towards the school, the day of the entrance ceremony has finally arrived. From above, another attendant playfully chides Maya, telling her not to tease her employers. This agile young woman, hanging from the carriage's interior frame, introduces herself as a personal attendant and intelligence agent for the Falkrantz family. Lieselot turns to the newcomer, complaining that Maya is being too unrestrained and asking to reprimand her, and simply laughs in response, seemingly enjoying the chaotic energy in the carriage. The journey is abruptly halted as their carriage stops moving. Looking out, they see a long line of stationary carriages ahead, and, who had gone to investigate, returns to the window and reports that there is a blockage about 3 kilometers up the road. She continues her report, explaining that a horse from a carriage ahead stumbled on a stone and injured its leg, causing the traffic jam. The implication is immediate and dire. Maya gasps, realizing they will not make it to the entrance ceremony in time. Thinking quickly, Lieselot suggests that running would be faster. Rudolph expresses his reservations, sighing that as members of the royal family, they cannot afford to be late for the ceremony, implying a need to maintain decorum. Despite his hesitation, Rudolph makes a decision. Taking Lieselot's hand, he calls her Liz and declares that they will go. He tells Maya and they will meet them later. As the two run off, and remarks to Maya how Lieselot's entire demeanor changes when she is with the prince. Hand in hand, Rudolph and Lieselot break into a sprint, running alongside the line of stopped carriages in a desperate bid to reach the Imperial Academy's entrance ceremony on time. He and his companions find themselves in a carriage with other students, all clad in their new Imperial Academy uniforms. Lieselot, seated beside him, speaks as and looks on from behind. The grand, Gothic edifice of the Imperial Academy looms before them. Elsewhere, a young man with sharp, intense eyes gazes forward, his expression one of grim determination. Inside a vast hall, the entrance ceremony is in full swing. Rows upon rows of new students sit in orderly fashion, listening to an address from the stage. Among the attendees, the sharp-eyed young man, another student, Lieselot, and Rudolph listen to the proceedings with varying degrees of focus. After the ceremony, the students file out onto the academy grounds. Rudolph, in his new uniform, walks among the crowd, taking in his new surroundings. In their new homeroom, a powerfully built instructor introduces himself as Boris Armian, their teacher for the next 3 years. He instructs the students to introduce themselves one by one. A timid girl named April from the Svensson family goes first, while Lieselot quietly admits her own dislike for such things and then grows visibly nervous. The next student is far more confident. With a bright smile, she announces herself as Sheila, the eldest daughter of the Anderson Frontier Marquis family, and asks everyone to treat her well. Her cheerful introduction and notable physique immediately draw the admiring and the somewhat stunned attention of the male students. While Rudolph finds the Anderson family name vaguely familiar and has a much stronger reaction, she realizes Sheila is Prince Robin's former fiancée, a revelation that sends her stumbling backward in her seat with a loud clatter, drawing unwanted attention. Lieselot quickly grabs a flustered and trying to cover for her by claiming she was just surprised by the connection to Robin. As the teacher calls for the next student, Rudolph realizes with a start that it is his turn. He stands, his heart pounding, and faces his new classmates. With a clear voice, he announces, "I am Rudolph Furstbaldyke." The revelation of his full name and royal lineage sends a wave of shock and disbelief through the classroom. He had braced himself for hostility, expecting the entire class to give him cold stares after his revelation. To his surprise, their reaction wasn't nearly as bad as he had anticipated. In fact, one student, Sheila Anderson, gazed at him with pure adoration. Her cheeks flushed as she clasped her hands together. Before Rudolph could fully process this, Lieselot stood up beside him, her voice cutting through the murmurs. She began her own introduction, announcing that she was the eldest daughter of the Falkrantz family, leaving Rudolph momentarily speechless. She then declared her name to be Lisbeth, the fiancée of Prince Rudolph. With unwavering confidence, she stated that if anyone had any opinions about the prince, they were to direct them to her. The pronouncement sent a wave of shock through the classroom. Amid the stunned silence, Lieselot maintained a firm, resolute gaze, while Sheila watched the scene unfold with a curious, unfaltering smile. Later, while walking through the academy grounds, Rudolph reflected on Sheila's assertiveness, thinking her quite daring. His companion, and advised that while first impressions are crucial, it might be better not to stand out too much. As if summoned by his thoughts, Sheila approached them with a cheerful greeting. She declared it an honor to be in the same class as Prince Rudolph and Lisbeth Summa, adding that she had hoped for a chance to speak with them. Lieselot quickly intervened, stating they needed to unpack at the dormitories and pointedly asking if Sheila didn't have the same obligation. Undeterred, Sheila turned directly to Rudolph, inviting him for tea as a gesture of friendship. Suddenly, Sheila's demeanor shifted dramatically. She grabbed Rudolph's hands, tears welling in her eyes, as she cried out how happy she was that he remembered her name. The outburst left Lieselot staring, utterly aghast. Rudolph firmly pulled his hands away, telling her to stop. He recognized her deliberate act, thinking that while a normal boy might fall for it, his own heart belonged to Liz. He bluntly told Sheila it was obvious she was plotting something and that she would have to find someone else. He immediately cringed, realizing he might have said something embarrassing. As he stood there, flustered, Lieselot watched him with a concerned expression. From a short distance away, Sheila turned back, offering a simple "see you again tomorrow" before continuing on her way. Once out of their sight, however, her casual demeanor vanished. With a soft teasage of her tongue, she brought a finger to her lips, a sly, calculating glint in her eyes revealing a hidden agenda. At the Imperial Academy, student life is starkly divided. Those from the imperial family and high-ranking nobility reside in a grand, luxurious dormitory, a testament to their status. Meanwhile, lower-ranking nobles are housed in a separate, more modest building. It is down the worn, aged hallway of this lower dorm that Prince Rudolph walks, carrying a box of his belongings, noting internally that the place is older than he expected. His arrival does not go unnoticed. Two students peer from a window, utterly shocked. They whisper to each other, questioning why Prince Rudolph would be in their dormitory when all other members of the imperial family stay in the luxury dorm. Rudolph simply states that he decided to stay here. He offers a practical excuse, explaining that this location is closer to the academy. However, he knows the real reason is to be near his brothers, Robin and Wilhelm, and acknowledges to himself that, as expected, he is not welcome elsewhere. The two students follow him to his room and begin to mock the run-down conditions. They dramatically lament the creaking floors, shabby beds, and terrible meals, finding it pathetic that a prince of the imperial family would have to endure such a life. Their teasing turns to shrieks of terror when one of them spots a spider. An attendant appears, sternly informing them that servants are not allowed in this dormitory. They must deal with pests themselves. The student continues to scream about the bug. In stark contrast, Rudolph calmly handles the situation. He explains that since he was a regular villager before his reincarnation, he's used to such things, noting that while times have changed, bugs haven't. With a simple flick, he sends the spider out the window, leaving the others speechless. His competence inspires immediate, desperate requests. The two students, now addressing him as Big Brother, plead for him to handle a centipede and a cockroach in their own rooms. Rudolph bluntly refuses. Despite his refusal, the students cling to him, overjoyed. For Prince Rudolph, who has never been relied upon by anyone, this sudden dependence sparks an undeniable feeling of happiness. He sighs, relenting that he will help them after he finishes unpacking. From outside, their grateful shouts of "Thanks, Big Brother," echo across the grounds. A flustered Rudolph yells back, demanding they stop calling him that. He is startled by the sudden appearance of Maya, who looks at him with concern and asks what he is doing. Her presence is explained as the scene pulls back to show her climbing through the second-story window of the boys' dormitory under the full moon. She explains that since the dorm is off-limits to women, she had no other choice. As his dorm mates watch in surprise, Rudolph asks what she's doing there. Later, in a garden setting, Lieselot explains her theory to the group. She posits that the most likely reason for Sheila Anderson's recent actions is the breaking of her engagement to Prince Robin. She turns to Rudolph, asking for his opinion on the matter. She continues, reasoning that from the Anderson family's perspective, their conflict with Rudolph is the cause of their misfortune. Therefore, she concludes, Sheila must have approached him out of resentment, seeking revenge, though she concedes that the entire affair was Robin's fault to begin with. Rudolph agrees that it is a logical assumption. Standing beside him, Lieselot affirms that it is likely something along those lines. Her expression then hardens with protective resolve. She vows to eliminate any tiny pest that might cling to Rudy-sama. Rudolph, however, seems unconvinced, musing that if Sheila truly sought revenge, her approach felt half-hearted. He doesn't seem to feel threatened. Taking command, Lieselot assigns and to guard Rudolph, while Maya will continue to guard Lieselot herself, noting that servants are permitted in the girls' dormitory, and crisply acknowledges her orders. Rudolph questions the logistics, pointing out that guards are difficult to arrange in the lower dorm where servants are forbidden. Lieselot brushes off his concern, but Rudolph counters with his own plan. He instructs her to have and monitor Wilhelm in the luxury dorm and report anything suspicious, shocking his attendants. He then turns to Lieselot with a bright smile, declaring that more importantly, he wants to enjoy a peaceful school life together with her. His directness causes Lieselot, Maya, and to blush furiously. With these new arrangements and declarations made, his life at the Grand Academy had truly begun. His new life at the Academy begins with a whirlwind of activity, from chaotic meals and brisk walks to the grounds with Lieselot, to the quiet focus of the classroom alongside his fiancée, Sheila Anderson, and his new rival. The students are gathered in the courtyard by their instructor, Boris Armian, who announces that they will now conduct a practical lesson. One of his classmates, a boisterous young man with light hair, immediately declares to Rudolph that since he comes from a knightly family, he won't lose, calling him Big Brother. Rudolph quietly asks him to stop. The instructor explains that the practical lesson for the boys will be swordsmanship. To begin, they will have matches against upperclassmen, a method designed to demonstrate the significant gap in skill. As he watches the upperclassmen systematically dismantle the arrogant first years, Rudolph realizes the purpose is to put them in their place. A wave of terror washes over him as he imagines his own fate, thinking he is going to be killed. His turn comes, and a familiar voice calls his name. It is his dark-haired rival, who approaches with a practice sword. He congratulates Rudolph on his enrollment and, with a disarming smile, declares himself Rudolph's opponent, asking him to go easy. The rival reveals he has been trained by Marquis Fockrantz for a year. Onlookers murmur in shock, noting that even someone like him is participating and comparing his reputed skill to that of Prince Oscar. Faced with this challenge, Rudolph's fear gives way to resolve. He internally vows to see how far his own sword can take him, as if he were facing Oscar himself. Meanwhile, the Academy's curriculum separates the students by gender for this lesson. While the boys practice swordsmanship, the girls are directed to a classroom for sewing, where they are instructed to embroider provided patterns. For Lieselot, this is a different kind of ordeal. Separated from Rudolph, she laments being forced to do sewing, a skill she is admittedly bad at, and her frustration is visible. As she struggles, a cheerful voice asks if the seat next to her is taken. It is Sheila Anderson. Lieselot looks up, wary, as Sheila celebrates her silent consent. She finds herself the center of attention as Sheila Anderson loudly wishes she had a wonderful fiancé too. Sheila continues, declaring her jealousy over how lovey-dovey Lieselot and the prince are. Another student chimes in, asking if the handkerchief Lieselot is embroidering is a gift for Prince Rudolph, causing Lieselot to gasp in surprise. Sheila's friendly demeanor vanishes, replaced by a chilling intensity. She leans in, asking Lieselot if she knows the reason why she doesn't have a wonderful fiancé. The question hangs in the air, and a horrifying thought strikes Lieselot. Sheila must have approached her out of resentment, seeking revenge. The realization dawns on her. Sheila's target isn't Prince Rudolph. It's her. Lieselot studies a letter, realization dawning on her. The recent assassination attempt wasn't targeting Prince Rudolph, it was aimed at her. She understands it's only natural for Prince Robin to hold a grudge, as she was the one who left his face in such a sorry state. Beside her, Sheila Anderson chuckles, telling her not to make such a serious face. Sheila waves a dismissive hand, assuring Lieselot that her comment was just a small joke. She then confesses that, if anything, she feels nothing at all toward Prince Robin. Lieselot listens in silence as Sheila continues, admitting that she is actually grateful that the engagement with him was broken off. They sit together in a classroom, the lecture continuing unnoticed in the background. She explains that the Anderson family's territory is a vital hub for both trade and defense on the western border. As the head of her family, protecting that border is her highest priority, and she never truly felt the need to marry into the imperial family. Sheila's expression darkens as she recalls her dinner with the prince. He was crude, violent, and utterly incompetent, yet carried himself as if he owned the world, a disappointment straight out of a picture book. She remembers how he spent the entire evening looking down on her and her family, the Western Margrave Andersons. Her anger flares as she recounts his shameless words. He had commented on her figure and declared he would take the country brat as his bride. She fumes at the memory of him calling a Margrave family mere country bumpkins. Lieselot tries to calm her down, but Sheila admits that when she heard Prince Robin had been beaten to a pulp, she felt a tiny bit of satisfaction. Having vented her frustrations, Sheila turns to her friend, a sense of relief washing over her. "Thank you, Lady Lisbeth," she says earnestly. Lieselot turns away, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. In the distance, an instructor's voice cuts through the air, announcing the results of a duel. Second year, Elliot wins. Next up, the instructor calls the next pair to the dueling grounds. First year, Rudolph. Second year, Oscar, step forward. Rudolph watches calmly as his older brother, the second Prince Oscar, approaches with a confident smile. As they face each other with practice, swords in hand, Oscar speaks. He notes that they didn't get a chance to talk at the New Year's party and admits, "I've been wanting to cross swords with you for a long time." He begins by apologizing for turning down Rudolph's past invitation. Rudolph, however, dismisses the apology, telling his brother not to worry about it, acknowledging that Oscar was joining another brother's political faction at the time. With the formalities exchanged, the duel begins in earnest. Oscar lunges through the air, bringing his sword down in a powerful strike that Rudolph meets with a firm block. He analyzes his brother's stance, recognizing the shallow step as a feint. Just as Rudolph prepares to deflect the blade and rush in, Oscar disengages, pulling back. Their swords clash again. Oscar correctly deduces that Rudolph trained under Marquis Fockrantz, noting his clean, straightforward style. He comments that Rudolph seems to have only sparred with opponents stronger than himself. Rudolph, surprised that his brother is on the offensive rather than defensive, manages to land a kick, finding the opening he created not bad. From the sidelines, fellow students watch in astonishment. They remark that Rudolph is actually holding his own against the strongest student in the entire academy, with one young admirer cheering on his big brother. Elsewhere, watching from a high balcony, Sheila Anderson also observes the duel unfolding below. She turns to Lieselot, who is calmly working on some embroidery. Sheila points out that Prince Rudolph is currently fighting his brother, Prince Oscar, and asks if Lieselot isn't worried. Lieselot simply replies that she is not. She states with unwavering confidence that Lord Rudy is not the type to lose. With that settled in her mind, she declares she will simply focus on her embroidery. Hearing this display of faith, Sheila sighs and remarks that Lady Lieselot must truly adore Lord Rudolph. The directness of the comment catches Lieselot completely off guard. Her composure shatters as Sheila cheerfully confesses her initial plan, to steal Lord Rudolph away as a bit of payback, since the broken engagement with Prince Robin had tarnished the Anderson family's name. Lieselot is left utterly horrified by the revelation. Her mind was made up. She truly did not like Miss Sheila. Despite this internal conviction, Sheila leaned in close, cheerfully dismissing Lieselot's standoffishness and insisting they become friends. She stammered, flustered by the other girl's persistence, her attention drawn back to the source of her frustration, a piece of embroidery. The crude, tangled threads were meant to be a likeness of Lord Rudolph, but the result was a mess. She despaired, lamenting that she was a girl who only knew martial arts, clumsy and not cute at all. Seeing her distress, Sheila's demeanor shifted from playful to practical. She pointed at the embroidery hoop, explaining that the chosen pattern was too complex for a beginner and that the fabric wasn't pulled taut enough, causing it to shift. She advised Lieselot to focus on the basics, be patient, and not rush, adding that the design she was attempting was truly lovely. Taken aback by the genuinely helpful advice, Lieselot found herself asking Sheila to teach her in more detail. Sheila's face lit up, and with a cheerful laugh, she readily agreed, declaring that they would give it their best effort together. Under Sheila's guidance, she worked diligently. At last, the piece was finished. The completed embroidery now showed a charming, well-defined image of herself and Rudolph holding hands. She had done it. Sheila erupted in celebration, pulling a stunned but pleased Lieselot into a tight hug. For the very first time, the embroidery she had always struggled with had finally taken shape. Sometime later, after the lesson, Lieselot approached Sheila with a newfound resolve, calling out her name. She bowed her head slightly, offering a sincere apology for her earlier words. She then thanked Sheila profusely for teaching her. Looking up, her expression earnest and vulnerable, she asked if, from that moment on, Sheila would be willing to be her friend. Sheila's face flushed a deep red. "Yes," she shouted, her joy and surprise mingling. Internally, she wondered in exasperation just how many times she had to agree before it would stick. A powerful shout echoes. "That's enough!" The cry cuts through the air with explosive force. The command brings a sparring match to an abrupt halt. On a stone courtyard under a starry sky, Prince Rudolph and Lieselot are frozen mid-duel. Both are on one knee, their wooden swords locked, but Rudolph has gained the upper hand, his blade pressed against Lieselot's neck. He holds his position, his expression taut with concern as he looks at her. Sweat drips from Lieselot's chin, her face a mask of exertion and frustration as the wooden blade rests against her throat. As the students watch with bated breath, the instructor, Boris Armian, raises his hand. With a booming voice, he declares that time is up, leaving the final result of the duel hanging in the air. He then announces the official outcome, a draw. A roar erupts from the crowd of onlookers. They are stunned that a first-year student managed to fight His Highness Oscar to a standstill. Amid the excitement, some students lament that their bets are now void. Exhausted from a bout, Rudolph drops to one knee, panting. One of his supporters rushes to his side, asking if he is all right. Rudolph, catching his breath, expresses his disappointment, stating that he couldn't win. His supporter quickly reassures him that he did a great job. From across the training ground, Oscar observes his younger brother. He calls out Rudolph's name, his expression unreadable. Internally, however, he disagrees with Rudolph's self-assessment, believing that in truth, he was the one who should have lost. He approaches Rudolph with a kind smile, wiping the sweat from his brow. Oscar praises his strength, admitting he was genuinely panicked when Rudolph attacked for real, ignoring the earlier request to go easy. He then declares with pride that, as his big brother, he will be counting on him from now on. Rudolph thanks him, but humbly suggests that forcing a draw for his sake was unnecessary, as it might harm Oscar's own reputation. As he listens, Oscar realizes his younger brother is still holding back his true strength, making him a difficult person to fully understand. The surrounding students are completely won over. Sheila Anderson marvels at Rudolph's splendid work, while others express their astonishment that he fought His Highness Oscar, a prince even they couldn't hope to beat, to a draw. Their admiration quickly turns to remorse. The very students who had been shouting insults before now approach Rudolph and bow deeply in apology. They confess they had no idea he possessed such talent. A flustered Rudolph can only stammer his thanks. He has a sudden realization. He had worried that a draw would tarnish Oscar's reputation, but the opposite occurred. Instead, his own reputation has dramatically increased among his peers. Turning to his brother, Rudolph asks if this was his plan all along. With a knowing smile, Oscar confirms that things went just as he said they would, revealing his strategic intent. He stands in stunned silence as Sheila Anderson, a fellow student, exclaims that at his current level, he is more than capable of serving as a student council officer. The suggestion hits him with such force that he can only utter a bewildered "huh?" Before he can protest, he finds himself inside the student council room. A dark-haired young man, the council's president, warmly welcomes him. Other members express their delight, though Sheila looks on with a flustered expression, realizing she couldn't refuse their invitation and now feels responsible for dragging Rudolph into this, having only intended to observe. The president explains that while joining isn't mandatory, they're happy he did. Another member, a girl with glasses, adds that by tradition, the student council president is always a member of the imperial family. The president then declares that next year, Rudolph will hold that very title. The prince is once again struck with disbelief. A boisterous member tells him not to be so tense, but then immediately questions if it's truly acceptable for a filthy pig to be in such a prestigious council. The president nonchalantly agrees that the point is valid, adding that this is why Prince Robin isn't present. He isn't exactly model student material. The boisterous one continues, assuring everyone that no one would oppose Rudolph's inclusion. He argues that the prince's behavior has improved and, more importantly, he possesses the strength to fight the formidable Lord Oscar to a draw. Rudolph remains silent, absorbing their reasoning. Despite their words, he internally rebels against the idea, convinced he cannot join. The president notices his hesitation and asks if something is wrong. A sudden, sharp realization dawns on Rudolph. This was a setup. He glares, thinking that his brother Oscar intentionally forced the draw to maneuver him into this exact position. Sensing the prince's true concern, the president leans in to whisper. He correctly guesses Rudolph's worry, that as a member of Prince Frederick's faction, working happily with Oscar's allies in the student council would look bad. He reassures him, explaining the unspoken rule that factional disputes are never brought into the council's business. Changing the subject, the president declares it's time for proper introductions. The energetic student with spiky hair beams, introducing himself as Derek McGregor from General Affairs. The composed girl with glasses follows, stating she is Crystal Svensson, the treasurer. With introductions made, Sheila glances around and asks about the vice president's whereabouts. The president replies that his class is likely running long. Rudolph, meanwhile, is lost in his own thoughts, wanting only to leave quickly and return to Lieselot, who is waiting for him. At that very moment, the door swings open. A young man with a severe expression and intense eyes enters, carrying a briefcase. A long, dark ruler slips from his grasp and clatters onto the floor, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Rudolph, Sheila, and Derek all stare, their faces a mixture of shock and apprehension at his sudden, imposing arrival. The severe-looking newcomer's arrival prompts the student council president to apologize to Crystal for his tardiness. Crystal, in turn, lightly scolds the man, whom she calls Vilsama, for being so late. As the president prepares to introduce him to Prince Rudolph, the prince stares in disbelief, internally questioning why someone named Wilhelm is present. The president then makes the formal introduction, presenting the newcomer as the vice president, Lord Wilhelm von Svallier. He explains to a stunned Rudolph that Wilhelm is the heir to House Svallier, a ducal family whose influence is second only to the imperial family itself. Before the assembled student council, the president explains that as the heart of the empire, the academy's culture influences all. As Rudolph stands before them, the vice president, Wilhelm von Svallier, watches with a sharp, calculating gaze. To the council's shock, Rudolph makes an astonishing request. Apologizing to his absent brother Oscar in his mind, he asks the group to please pretend he never joined the student council at all. Without further explanation, he turns to leave with a curt, "Excuse me." The other members are left stunned, but Wilhelm von Svallier immediately calls out, demanding that Rudolph wait. As Rudolph walks away down a stone corridor, Wilhelm gives chase, shouting his name and demanding to know what he is planning. Later, Rudolph confers with his brother, Oscar, who asks what is wrong. Rudolph explains that the vice president is someone he absolutely cannot get along with, stating that the man is on the same level of detestability as their brother Robin. He elaborates on the situation from Wilhelm's point of view, explaining that the vice president had pretended to be Rudolph to get close to Lieselot and toy with her feelings. Now, Wilhelm sees Rudolph as the one who stole the girl he was targeting. Rudolph notes that in the War Chronicle, Wilhelm and Liz are lovers, and his own grand plan involved becoming emperor and taking Liz for himself, making the vice president's deception an act worthy of 1,000 deaths. Elsewhere, Wilhelm von Svallier reflects on the encounter. He acknowledges that while the history of the War Chronicle may have changed, the current developments feel eerily similar. He finds himself unable to read Rudolph's intentions or predict his next move. His thoughts sharpen as he recalls Rudolph's eyes, which he saw as overflowing with hostility. This, more than anything, convinces him that Rudolph is nothing like the great hero from the Chronicle. With such animosity directed at him, Wilhelm concludes it wouldn't be strange if Rudolph were plotting his assassination. Back in their conversation, Rudolph delivers a clear and serious warning to Oscar. Wilhelm is the one person he must never, under any circumstances, let his guard down around. Having said his piece, Rudolph excuses himself, leaving Oscar alone. His brother's face is a mask of confusion and concern, wondering about the strange and intense relationship between Rudolph and the vice president. He stands silently as his younger brother, Rudolph, walks away down the long, arched corridor. Rudolph's ultimatum hangs in the air. If Oscar seriously wants his help, he must sever all connections with Wilhelm. He continues down the hall, leaving the choice entirely in his brother's hands. He wonders to himself how this confrontation will ultimately play out. Elsewhere, Lieselot and Sheila are waiting together on a bench. As Rudolph enters the room, Sheila spots him and calls out, chiding him for being so late. He reacts with a groan of annoyance, questioning Sheila's presence with Lieselot. Offended, Sheila demands to know why he greeted her with such disdain. Undeterred, Sheila physically pushes a flustered Lieselot towards Rudolph, urging her to properly hand something over to the prince. With her task complete, Sheila cheerfully announces her departure, calling herself a nuisance and bidding them farewell until the next day. Rudolph watches her go, suspicious that she is orchestrating another one of her schemes. He is left alone with Lieselot. As she hesitantly begins to speak, he can't help but notice that they seem to have grown closer somehow. She presents him with a handkerchief, calling his name softly. On it is a cute, embroidered depiction of the two of them holding hands. He realizes with a start that it's meant to be them, a gift she made for her embroidery practical. He thanks her profusely, telling her it's incredibly cute. The light-hearted moment gives way to a more serious atmosphere. Lieselot looks at him directly and asks if he remembers that it has been nearly a year since their reunion. Her thoughts drift back to that time. She recalls how she had suddenly burst into tears, and without a moment's hesitation, he had offered her his own handkerchief. She remembers being certain, even then, that his kindness was genuine, despite his reputation as the tyrant prince and the self-deprecating way he spoke of his past. With a warm, heartfelt smile, she explains that the embroidered handkerchief is her way of finally returning the one he gave her. She expresses her hope that, with their academy life just beginning, they can continue to get along well. The emotional weight of the moment proved overwhelming for Prince Rudolph, eliciting a dramatic reaction from a nearby observer. Sheila Anderson cried out in alarm, shouting his name and asking if he was all right, mistaking his tears of joy for a medical emergency. Her alarm, however, was a facade for sheer bliss. Internally, Sheila was overcome, her face glowing with delight as she thought about the scene. To her, Rudolph and Lieselot were simply too precious. This intense investment was no mere whim. Sheila, it turned out, was a hardcore shipper, one who not only rooted for them, but also chronicled their romance in her own writings. She pumped her fists in excitement at the thought of them together, while Lieselot looked on with a knowing, faint smile. The fervor of that day settled, and 2 weeks passed. In the time since, Rudolph found his days had become remarkably peaceful. He sat in class, reflecting that there had been no further attempts from the student council to recruit him. He continued his musings while walking the academy grounds, noting that his reputation seemed to have improved thanks to his performance in the practical exam. Lately, even his classmates had started greeting him. He was particularly happy that Lieselot had also managed to make a friend, though he was surprised that she had somehow become so close with the boisterous Lady Sheila. Her friendship did have its quirks, however. Rudolph admitted to himself that it was sometimes bothersome how Sheila would stare at Lieselot with such burning intensity, internally urging him to be more affectionate. But despite these small oddities, as he walked with Lieselot and Sheila under a clear sky, a genuine smile spread across his face. He realized that school was, for the first time, really fun. As he and Lieselot continued down a sunlit corridor, lost in their peaceful moment, they were unaware of being watched. From the shadows of a nearby archway, Prince Oscar observed them, his expression unreadable. From his vantage point, the second prince observes the sudden commotion in the hall. Rudolph and Lieselot are taken completely by surprise, their attention snapping towards the source of the disturbance. Around them, the faces of their classmates, Sheila, the vice president, and others, are frozen in wide-eyed shock. A thunderous, jarring sound reverberates through the entire hall, bringing all activity to a halt. Every student turns, their expressions a mixture of confusion and alarm. The question hangs unspoken in the air, voiced by one bewildered onlooker. What in the world? A sudden commotion erupts in the classroom as a crudely written poster is discovered. It bears a shocking accusation. The fourth Prince Rudolph is manipulating Student Council President Oscar and plotting to seize control of the academy. The students, including Rudolph, Lieselot, and Sheila, stare at the poster in disbelief. Rudolph's eyes are wide, his expression a mask of pure shock at the public slander. His shock is mirrored by the whispers spreading through the room. Students murmur that the act is creepy, a disgrace to the imperial family, and utterly out of place. Rudolph remains frozen, unable to react. As the murmurs continue, Lieselot's demeanor shifts. A menacing aura emanates from her as her eyes narrow, and she demands to know who did this, her voice cutting through the chatter. Her intensity does little to quell the gossip, as one student remarks that where there's smoke, there's fire. Sheila immediately tells them to stop, but it is Liselott who acts, swiftly tearing the offensive poster from the board. The class representative, April Svensson, stands with tears in her eyes, explaining that she and the others were just as confused. She calls the note a disrespectful, creepy smear that no one even wanted to touch. Liselott turns to the class, her voice firm as she tells everyone to calm down. Sheila supports her, stating her belief that no one in their class would do such a thing and that bullying can never be allowed. As she speaks, the vice president, Lord Wilhelm von Svallier, stands observing the now empty board. He turns from the board with a loud laugh, casually apologizing to Ronnie for the disturbance and remarking on how hard the teacher works him. Ignoring the vice president, Rudolph quietly thanks Liselott for her help. She dismisses it, saying it was nothing. The vice president then takes his place at the front of the room, announcing that class is starting. The students, still on their feet from the commotion, begin to question why they are all still standing. Moments later, the chaos subsides. Rudolph, Liselott, and Sheila are seated at their desks, books open as the lesson begins. He sits with his friends in the bustling academy dining hall, where gossip about recent events fills the air. Sheila Anderson leans in, explaining to Rudolph and Liselott that the story she is about to tell happened about 3 days ago. Her story flashes back to a tense confrontation in front of the student council room. Prince Oscar, his voice sharp with anger, pointed directly at Vice President Wilhelm, roaring his name and accusing him of planning a setup. The fury on Oscar's face was unmistakable as he delivered his verdict. In light of the betrayal, he declared his intention to expel Wilhelm from the student council. Turning his back on the vice president, he formally severed their ties, stating they were done. He then proclaimed his new allegiance. He would support Rudolph, the student council, and indeed, the entire academy. Back in the present, Sheila finishes her account by repeating Oscar's final, cryptic words, that the only one he could trust was Rudolph. She then adds her own prejudiced remark, muttering that nothing good ever comes from someone with amber eyes. The story leaves Rudolph deep in thought, finding it hard to accept. He wonders what could have possibly enraged the typically composed Oscar to such a degree, especially since the malicious flyer targeting him appeared right after this incident. His confusion is mirrored by Liselott, who asks Sheila for clarification. Rudolph joins in, questioning how she knows so much. With a knowing chuckle, Sheila hints that there's more to the story behind Oscar's drastic change in attitude. With a playful expression, she reveals her secret. She has her own information network. She proudly reminds them that, despite appearances, she is a lady of House Antesian, and finds their surprised reactions quite cute. Putting her network's information to use, Sheila points a finger with absolute certainty. She declares that the culprit behind the flyer is most likely the student council treasurer, Miss Crystal. Liselott immediately connects the dots, recalling that Crystal had referred to the vice president as Serville. Sheila confirms the motive. Crystal is in love with Lord Wilhelm and will be devastated if he left the council. Rudolph processes this, a quiet revealing his contemplation of this new suspect. He listens as Sheila Anderson continues her explanation, noting that the rumor is spreading primarily among the female students. This, she posits, is because the vice president, Wilhelm, is exceptionally popular with them. She adds that the girls who admire Wilhelm have apparently banded together to propagate these rumors, causing Rudolph to realize the source of the coordinated attack. Sheila then pivots to a new piece of information, asking if they are aware of their class representative, a Miss April. She reveals that April is the younger sister of student council treasurer Crystal, as they share the Svensson family name. Both Rudolph and Liselott are visibly shocked by this connection. Following their reaction, Sheila lays out her hypothesis. Miss April likely wrote and distributed the flyer because her older sister, Crystal, instructed her to. She confirms they are sisters from the Svensson Count family. She elaborates, recounting what she heard April say. April allegedly told others that her sister confirmed the animosity between Lord Rudolph and young Lord Wilhelm. Sheila concludes that April is a talented actress, skillfully using her innocent demeanor to lend credibility to the flyer. Liselott, her expression hardening, agrees that April is an actress for feigning innocence while spreading such tales. She then questions why the male students would also believe the rumors. Sheila offers a two-part explanation: jealousy and peer pressure. Those two concepts, jealousy and peer pressure, resonate deeply, creating a vortex of sudden, unpleasant understanding for the prince. Sheila expands on her point, explaining that many students resent Rudolph for his high praise in swordsmanship and his friendly terms with popular girls like Liselott and herself. She theorizes they're engaging in passive aggression. It's easy to join in attacking a tyrant prince with a bad reputation, and there's safety in numbers, ensuring no punishment. Liselott questions if the world truly works that way. Rudolph, however, looks downcast, admitting to himself that despite the logic, the explanation still doesn't sit right with him. His thoughts are interrupted by the arrival of his brother, second Prince Oscar, who expresses relief that Rudolph has come to the student council room. Without hesitation, Rudolph confronts him, asking directly if it's true that he intends to expel Wilhelm. As Oscar looks away, a faint scratch mark appearing on his cheek, Rudolph presses further, demanding to know if something happened between them. He listened as his brother, Prince Oscar, explained his opposition to the vice president, citing vague issues with his behavior and comments. Oscar stated he would rather not go into detail to avoid bad-mouthing the man, promising to contact him properly later. Internally, Rudolph felt he should just nod along, but a flicker of alarm made him question the consequences if the vice president were to suddenly disappear. He could only manage a hesitant, "I see," but still, seated comfortably on a sofa next to Crystal Svensson, Oscar pressed his point, telling Rudolph it would be a great help if he joined their cause. Overwhelmed by the proposition, Rudolph could only offer a non-committal reply, stating that he would think about it. Later that night, the academy dormitory was quiet. Inside his room, Rudolph sat alone at his desk, the only light coming from a single candle. He leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms above his head with a sigh of exhaustion. The day's events weighed heavily on him as he wondered aloud what could have possibly happened between Oscar and Wilhelm to create such animosity. His mind raced, questioning if Lady Crystal and Lady April had truly orchestrated their recent scheme on their own. As Lieselot's questioning gaze flashed in his memory, he leaned forward, his expression hardening. He came to a firm conclusion. There was one thing he now knew for certain. The realization struck him with chilling clarity. There is a traitor somewhere near me. At that exact moment, perched silently on a tree branch just outside his window, was Lieselot.